There's no lights. There's no electricity anywhere. So it's absolutely dark. I pull around a corner and there's two older guys in their outfits right there. And then all of a sudden, boom! And then bullets started flying. I'm hearing the Diska, the 50 cal the Russians use, and AKs going off. Then I hear our weapons, my crew serve weapon from our guys going off. And then I'm hearing pistol fire. I flip down my nods and I ran back. And I'm firing my weapon as I'm going in the direction of where I'm seeing the tracers coming from. And there's just stuff coming in. And I'm like, oh, this is not good. I'm going to tell you a story.
Yeah.
We were ambushed in August 05.
Afghanistan.
In Afghanistan. One of my teams was working for the Marines up in the Korengal Valley, and the Marines were getting pretty hammered all the time. And they wanted my soldier. We carry backpack speakers. Like to go, like we could set up a deal remotely and like play helicopter messages or surrender, but we could hump in there with the backpack speaker and do this. But they wanted him, and I never really quite got the story, but my soldier called me, and when I say my soldier,
he just worked under you,
yes,
right?
But a lot of people don't like people to say, well, my troops or but fuck that, they were my soldiers,
right?
Anyway, he called me and said, I've been fired, and they want me out of here now.
Hold on, a soldier said he'd been fired?
Yeah, so he was working for the Marines, and since he refused to do what the Marines wanted them to be out in front of everybody else with their loudspeaker playing I don't know what, and he said, he goes, First Sergeant, he goes, I'll do anything for them. I will go shoot for them, but I'm not just going to get out in the front with the loudspeaker with my team. And he goes, it doesn't make good sense to do this. And I'm like, all right, so you're fired. He said, I'm fired. So, and I said, there's no getting, he said, no, and I've got to go now. So we had to put up a convoy. We had to get enough people because we had to have 3 vehicles to go this from Bagram Airfield. And this was up toward Asadabad.
How many miles is that?
It's like an all-day thing because
okay.
not all the roads are crap.
Dirt roads, yeah.
Yeah, you're not driving very fast at all.
And what vehicles are you in?
So one of the vehicles will be a Toyota Hilux, a right-hand drive Toyota Hilux. I'll have that in the front. That's what I was in the front.
That's the one you commandeered?
Well, no, that was in Afghanistan.
Okay.
These are what we had Toyota Hiluxes, civilian vehicles.
Yeah.
It's like a Tacoma,
yeah.
except it's got the steering wheel on the other side, and they call them Hiluxes. And then a LMTV, a light military truck vehicle. And it wasn't up armored. And then we had a Humvee.
Anybody have a machine gun?
Yeah, there's a crew serve weapon.
Okay.
A 240 Bravo, which is like the old M60s. This, except that it's a 7.62 and it's on the back vehicle. And then we have a SAW gunner with the squad automatic rifle, which shoots a 5.56 round, and then everybody's got pistols and rifles. And
how many guys are going with you?
So I had 2 people in the front truck. In my truck, I had my intel guy with me, and then in the middle truck, we had 3 people in the middle truck, and then we had, I think, 4 in the back truck. In my memory, and so one of my soldiers told a little bit of this story the other day, and his memory. I was like, no, I don't think that's the way it happened. But anyway, so we all remembered it a little differently, which is okay in the moment. But anyway, so we got to go pick up this soldier. We got to get we have to put in a fragmentation order to the higher ups, so they got to approve it so we can go drive over there and get them. We didn't have enough people, so I had to recruit some people to come with me, and one of the people I recruited with me, that's why I had extra people that are just some of my extra team guys that were back transitioning to other places. And then we got an illustrator who had been in 11 Bravo, which is a grunt before. And he said, and he just wanted to go out.
An illustrator?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
He drew like cartoons.
Oh, okay. That's what he did in his.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And he did that for the Army.
Oh, wow.
And so, but he had been an infantry soldier before. And so he's going to ride with us because we just needed so many people to have enough people in the 3 vehicles. And so we were supposed to leave really early in the morning, but the illustrator was late. and we could not leave without the illustrator. And then on the way there, we're going to distribute information along the way to different villages along the way going there. And
like
we're gonna,
pamphlets or something? Or what?
pamphlets, paper products.
Yeah.
And a lot of the things in Afghanistan, people they weren't literate, they couldn't read,
Yeah.
and so a lot of stuff had just illustrations.
Oh,
on it.
he's illustrating for that.
Well, we had our own illustrators.
Huh.
We had our own illustrators, our own movie guy, all kinds. But anyway, so we're late moving out. We get late, and then we're going through some of the villages, and some of the villages kind of like have gypsy people, which the females can come out with the men, and they're dressed in colorful clothes. And we got stuck in this place because they just wanted to talk, and so, you try not to give a bad impression. So we're handing out stuff. We're talking to the little kids. We're like, yeah, because we've got to go through this place all the time. We don't want them shooting at us. And so we stopped there, and we were there a little bit longer than I wanted to be.
But you feel like it's rude to move on if you move too fast.
Well, I don't know if it's rude, but, there's enough bad stuff happening that I want to make a good impression for us wherever we go.
Yeah.
And because they know what vehicles, who's driving what. And so we get there, and then after that, it's pretty desolate. You think it was desolate coming through South Pass. Afghanistan is much, This is a lot like Afghanistan. But anyway, we get to the beginning of the Tagab Valley, and we'd been there 2 weeks prior on a mission, just going through and seeing what's what, and distributing stuff and meeting the people, because that's part of our job, is to go out and meet people and get our message across for whatever, in the area we're working in. So we stopped, and I wanted to speak to the police chief in the Tagab police, but he wasn't there. And so one of his underlings said, "Oh, he'll be back in just a few minutes. Please wait. Have him sit down and hang out for a little while." Basically, is what they said. So we waited a little while. We waited a little while, and I waited about 45 minutes. I'm like, no. And I said, "Are you sure he's not coming?" And so they wanted us to wait even more. And I was like, "No." And we hadn't been wearing our helmets because we're trying to look friendly.
Right.
And so we're getting ready to drop down in the valley and start this trek through the Tagab Valley. And I said, "You guys need to put on your helmets." I said, "I just do not feel good about this," because it was getting late.
Right.
We're already late, and we want to get through the valley before it gets dark. Well, when we drop down into the valley, you have to go through this creek there is no good road except till the Chinese started building one in Afghanistan. Right. Anyway, we got in that creek, and the LMTV blew a tire, so we had a flat. I'm like, the guy driving is my head mechanic, Craig, and he said, "No worries, we got air power and all this stuff, and we'll just crack this tire and put the spare on and get moving." Well, nope. The air pressure was not working correctly. It just one of them things. And so we've got a flat tire, and so we're set up perimeter around us just to keep an eye. And the villagers are all, they're curious, and it probably took about an hour and a half to crack the nuts.
Oh my gosh! Off the wheel,
on the wheels, to get that switched out. And we finally got something, but it's late. It's like late. I'm like, But we'd been through there a couple of weeks prior, so I sort of know the path, and it's going to take us to the A&A camp that's up in the mountain on the lake, which is kind of outside of in between Kabul and Bagram. And this was kind of a shortcut to get us going towards Abad. And so it got dark, and all of a sudden we're driving through the town of Tagab, or village, I should say. There's no lights. There's no electricity anywhere. There's no whatever. So it's absolutely dark. I pull around a corner, and there's two older guys in their outfits right there. And then all of a sudden, boom! And I was like, holy shit! And I told Han, stay right here, and then the bullets started flying. I'm hearing the Diska, like the 50 cal the Russians use, and AKs going off. Then I hear our weapons, my crew serve weapon from our guys going off, and then I'm hearing pistol fire. And so I flipped down my nods.
Are you driving?
I was driving, but I told Han to stay there, and I ran back. And I'm running back, and I'm firing my weapon as I'm going in the direction of where I'm seeing the tracers coming from. and the lights are off on the LMTV, and I'm like, oh shit. And then I see one of the soldiers is on the running boards, and he's firing, and I'm hearing the crew serve weapon, and there's just stuff coming in, and I'm like, I was like, this is not good. And the lights are off on the vehicle, and then the vehicle started, and the lights came on again, and there was the like the engine fired out,
right,
puffed out some smoke, and I'm like, rock on. And it started driving forward. I'm like, good, we're gonna get out of here.
Yeah.
And we got up, and Aguilar said, they're messed up. He said, Craig's bad. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah. And I said, all right, well, we got these guys coming. We can't stop here. And I told Phil, I said, on the GPS, get our grid, and we're going to send it. And I said, we got to go find a place to ford up, because I don't know how many people are going to start coming after us. And we've got severely wounded people. And so we haul ass through the town. Lights on. They already know we're there. There's no need fucking driving in nods. And so I'm looking for a place that we can
hunker
ford
down.
up,
yeah,
get the medical stuff going on these guys, and see. So there was a lone house, and in these out places they have big walls around them, and there's usually just one door. And so it was kind of up on a hill a little bit, so we could shoot down. And so we got there, and I said, so I put everybody out.
How far outside the?
I would say it was probably less than 2 kilometers, if that far.
Oh, so it was pretty close.
It was close, but we needed it because they're bleeding pretty bad.
Yeah.
And so we get those guys out of the LMTV. Aguilar, who's a Dallas-Fort Worth motor cop, he with a red lens flashlight gets a IV into Craig. Craig is the RPG hit right above his head.
Well, that was the boom you heard.
That was the boom, and he had shrapnel all on the left side of his body, and and it's still there today. And Ricky Scott had got hit with that Disca in his behind, but he also had glass from the explosion in his eye. And then Dorman had a scratch on his head, which wasn't bad. So we get him all out of the vehicles. McDonald, who's this little redheaded kid, he's like,
he's freaking out.
We're gonna die.
Was that what he was? Was he just
no?
He
didn't
like
say anything, and I said, get your saw over there. Keep an eye on there. If them bastards start coming, you need to let me know, and just start shooting. I don't care. Just start shooting. And I'm looking, and Jimmy Weinhold, who worked for Cisco Systems later, went back as a contractor, knows he's like computer guy. And I said, well, let's get help. Let's get the helicopters here. And he goes, they can't hear us. I can't hear anything. We're not getting any return. And I'm like, what? Our radio's not working. And I said, well, call it in anyway, and give them our GPS, tell them what's happened. Even though we don't know, just keep talking. So he keeps trying.
How at this point, how close are you to the nearest military guys? You're out in the middle of nowhere.
We are a long ways
Wow.
from anywhere, and we're in the Tagab Valley. Anyway. So I'll get to that in a minute. Everybody's doing their job like super professional. Like when it happened, everybody slipped out of their vehicles and were returning fire. And
are they still firing on you then?
No, they're not firing now.
Okay.
I'm seeing lights coming.
You see they're coming.
I know because we stopped, and they know that they hit us.
Yeah.
They don't know how bad we are. They know that we drove out with all 3 vehicles. And so we're getting everything set up. We're trying to call on the radio. It's not working. I'm like, I can't let these guys die. We're not going to die like this. And if we are, we're going to take care of a bunch of them. And so Aguilar gets the IV in. Dorman was screaming. I mean, he was screaming, and Craig's not saying anything. He's just being quiet. Ricky's being quiet, but Dorman's screaming. And I go, where are you hurt? He goes, and he's got blood on his head. And I looked, and he's got a little scratch up here I mean, compared to the other two. And I told him, I go, just shut up. I said, and quit screaming. You're not helping. Shut up. We're going to be okay. But he was just, adrenaline gets up and you don't know. He was just, and I'm sure we were all scared. I mean, I'm scared. I'm scared that I'm going to let them down. That was my biggest thing. And so we get the wounded in the Humvee. The LMTV has no windshield now, the truck. Jimmy goes, I'll drive the truck. I'm like, all right. I said, we're going to turn off. We're going to drive with nods on.
That's challenging, no?
Yes.
Because you can't tell depth.
No, there's no depth, and it's also really dark. The mountains are up, so there's no ambient light to kind of help magnify that.
Right.
And so the nods, it's really dark. It's like looking down in a tunnel. And so we're driving, and we'd been through there in 2 weeks before in the daytime. And so I'm like, I'll be able to find the way. And when these roads are like 2 tracks, they're just, two tracks going through. And we get to this really, really hard pan area. And
when the guy with the shrapnel, do you load him up with morphine?
No, we didn't have morphine. He just had IV.
He just had an IV. So, man, driving on those bumpy roads must be killing that guy.
Yeah, and he just grinned and he just gritted. He's a tough guy.
And where was your goal? Just to get out of that situation?
There was an Afghan National Army camp up in the mountains, up above the valley, kind of on our way to Kabul, kind of about on the outskirts of Kabul, but it goes towards Asadabad. And I just wanted to get there because at least the ANA would be able to help us. And I knew there were some guys from the National Guard there. I don't know if they were from the Alabama National Guard, but they were training the Afghan Army.
Right.
And so that's where we're trying to get to.
Yeah.
But I'd only been there the once, and that was in the daytime. And so we get to this area where the road just disappears. You can't see anything in the dark. And I told everybody, turn your lights on.
And how fast are you traveling?
We were probably going and we were probably 30 miles an hour, maybe. But
on a rough road, that's hard.
Rough. Yeah. And so, and it may have not even been that fast. And so when I got to this spot, I was praying please God, let me find the way. Show me the way. Please show me the way. Don't let me let these guys die. And I said, flip the lights on. Everybody flip the lights on. And I couldn't tell which way it was. And I just said, okay, that's the way. And that's the way I went. And then after a while, I was like, oh, that's a 2-track. I'm on a 2-track. I'm good. And then I saw the beginning of the switchback that goes up into the mountain. And I was like, oh, thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. I was so relieved. And I talked to Craig about it. And he said, I was so happy. He goes, when we saw that mountain. And so we get up to the ANA checkpoint. And the ANA guys, and I said, and they were like, oh, it's the Americans. And they were like, and I couldn't understand because what they were saying. And I said, radio. And so they said, yeah. And we didn't know if they were friendly ANA or not so friendly ANA because that's still,
Yeah.
And so Jimmy comes up and they said they got a radio. So I think Khan went with him. But anyway, they got in the back of a truck with the ANA while we were waiting there and they took off. And I'm like, all right, okay. What else we got?
Yeah.
Got to trust those guys. And so all of a sudden I hear a Southern accent. You guys all right? And I said, and I said, no, we're not all right. We need to get on a radio. And he goes, well, everybody knows what's going on. I said, what do you mean? He goes, everybody hears what's going on the radio because when a firefight happens and you get on the radio, everybody has to stay off because of the bandwidth
right.
to get on there. And so he goes, everybody. I said, wow, everybody can hear us. Wonder what can't hear them. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. But so he takes me up, and I called back to CJ Soda, and I said, Craig is severely wounded. I said, we need to medevac and all the things that are going on with that. The ANA have got Craig and Dorman and Ricky Scott, and they're bandaging him up and and getting them all as fixed as they can. Craig is, I still don't know how he lived with that. It exploded right above his head.
Right.
And all through his body. Ricky's got glass in his eye, we learned later, and a bullet in his backside, and Dorman got a scratch. But he was the loudest. And he retired as sergeant major. He just retired.
Huh.
He stayed in quite a while. But anyway, so the A&A, so I'm on the radio, and I'm talking to, and I said, and so they don't want to send the helicopters in the dark. Not the special ops guys, but the CTAF people. And so
what's CTAF? What's that?
It's like the command staff. It's like a general that lives in Italy.
I see.
But he's the commander
right.
of the guys that were there. And they sent them and they're there, but now they don't want to land because they see all the A&A guys. You know,
and they don't trust that.
And then so they don't trust it. But, you know, my guys are there, and we've got the LZ going and everything. We're trying to get them to land, and they wouldn't do it. I had to go tell those A&A guys to put
leave?
Down their weapons and stand back from their weapons. And I really that was just wrong.
Right.
But they got the helicopters landed. But as for them to land, the colonel that was the doctor for the special ops guys, he asked me, he goes, first sergeant, he goes, he goes, how many times have you had to turn the tourniquet? And I said, this will be the third time. And he said, okay. And so we didn't have a tourniquet on him, but when you have a tourniquet, it means life or death. They got to land.
Right.
So they landed.
Right.
And that was pretty quick thinking of the doc to say that over the radio.
Right.
Because then it gives nobody a choice.
Right.
And so they landed, took him back.
How many birds? 2 birds over there?
There was one circling, and then the one that landed
right.
for the medevac. And there may have been one more. I don't remember.
Are they Blackhawks? Is that what they are?
They're Blackhawks. Yeah. And then they may have had another gunship with them. I'm not. It's all kind of.
Yeah.
Anyway, and so we go up to the A&A camp. I told everybody, let's write what happened right now while it's fresh in our minds. So
because you have to do a report.
We did. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But I told everybody, write your own deal, and I don't want to see it, and we'll get it all when they come and get us. They told us to stay, and this was the King's Palace. Whenever there was a king,
oh yeah,
but it's like a big house next to the lake.
Yeah,
and so the third group, HHC's guys, they got together with some, and I can't remember which country, but it was one of the, I think it might have been the Dubai Special Forces or the Cutters. Anyway, one of their special, and they had these cool French up-armored vehicles that looked like little spaceships. But anyway, they came and got us like later that day. Is like late because we didn't get into ABAD until after dark. And then the next morning we headed on up to where my soldiers were with the Marines to get them moved because we still had to do that.
Same vehicles?
We had the same LMTV with
and you didn't get ambushed the next day.
No, we have all the.
Wow.
We stayed there in the A&A camp until everybody came with us, and then we had a big convoy to go on up. But when we got to the Marine camp, and I went in to see the S3, the major who was the S3, who's like the plans and operations. That's what S3 is. That dude said to me, he goes, well, Marines, we're all trained as riflemen before, so we all know how to shoot. And I mean, I almost went through him. The captain from third group and the first sergeant, they grabbed me and they said, it's time for you to leave. Anyway, we got him moved, but I was like, jackwagon. But
that night when you were there, after you got the guys loaded on the helicopter.
Well, the first thing the National Guard said to me after I got on the radio was, he goes, you want to go down and get them now?
Oh.
He goes, we'll take the A&A and go down and get them. I said, no, I need to get my guys squared away first. And I said, we're not going to go down there in the dark. We'll wait till daylight. And then change plans.
Is it adrenaline just pumping in you still, or are you just wiped out at that point once it all settled down?
Sleep. I didn't sleep.
Yeah.
I was up. I did not. I kind of laid down but my mind was running because I didn't know how if Craig was going to live or not.
Yeah.
I didn't know if what was going on with him. I knew he had a bullet in him. And so when they got there, the SF guys say that Dorman was probably staying there. He didn't get shipped to Germany, but they put Ricky and Craig. They went on a plane straight to Germany.
Wow. And
then from there they went back to Fort Bragg, and then Craig, I'd call, and about I don't know I don't know if he was there about 6 weeks, but he called me. He goes, I got to come back. He goes, can I come back? I go, you want to come back now? He said, I got to come back now. He goes, if I don't, this is going to get in my head. And
wow.
And I said, I went and talked to our commander, and I said, he wants to come back. He goes, what do you think? I said, if he wants to come back, let him come back. He didn't have to do anything. He can just come back. And no, he came back and he went out. We went back to that valley. We went back to that valley numerous times. Because it was just full of, first there was a lot of poppy growers, and it wasn't just Taliban. It was criminals.
Right.
And so it was a whole mixture of all kinds of stuff. But we went back there quite a few times with the.
So that's kind of the overall. In Afghanistan, it wasn't a particular army. You were fighting because it's kind of split up in warlords and.
Yeah, every valley
local.
Every valley is different from another valley, and they may not get along with the people on the other side, and
who's supplying them with weapons? Because they had a lot of stuff, right? RPGs.
Everybody had weapons. Everybody, it's Russia imports stuff everywhere.
Right.
Anybody thought, and especially when the Soviet Union broke up, they have all this stuff.
Yeah.
And somebody's selling that stuff out there to somewhere, and there's a lot of them. So like in Afghanistan, we'd run across stuff that was there from the 70s when it was an open country, and all the hippies would go over there,
right.
And have a good time. And so you saw stuff scratched in rocks like peace, but so it's and like people in there's redheads, blondes, blue-eyed people.
Afghans.
Oh,
because
it's been the crossroads forever,
Yep.
since Alexander the Great and everywhere else. And so and the Brits and the Russians and everybody's been in there forever. So and everybody else. I mean, the Romans went through there. I mean, everybody goes through. It's the crossroads.
Yeah.
And so it was very, very, very rural when we first got there. Like we went to one place and they still thought the Russians were there. That's how.
Wow.
And so because of our uniforms were kind of a different color than they used to be, with that gray whatever stuff that they gave us. But anyway, I would say that's probably. I did a lot of my son is at Fort Bragg or Fort Liberty right now. They've changed the names to all these places. And a friend of mine who is the commander of the PSYOP forces in Iraq. Yeah, he's now doing stuff from in Afghanistan, but I think he was in Qatar, and his name was Mike Ciroli, and full colonel. He's retired, but he still works as a civilian for KPOC, which is the Civil Affairs Psychological Operations Command.
Yeah.
At Fort Bragg, and my son is at Fort Bragg, so Mike has invited him over for Thanksgiving a couple times. And Augustus asked him, he said, and I never thought about this because people always thought I was kind of. He said, "What did you like? Why do you like my dad?"
Your son asked him this?
Yeah.
Yeah. What did he say?
And he said, "I like your dad for a lot of reasons, but your dad got things done. And I may have not always asked for permission to get things done, but I got things done." And it was the same way when I was in Bosnia. I got to go on stuff because I got things done.
It strikes me, just knowing you and hearing that story, that when things go down, it kind of turns a part of you. It switches that on, and you're functioning at a level maybe a lot of people don't, where they might panic. You start looking for solutions, and and maybe in a weird sort of way, you function better when things are chaotic. Maybe in that sense.
My wife says I lived on that stress.
Yeah,
I I was, and that was part of the problem when I needed that adrenaline. And so what my person that I talked to said, I create adrenaline. And so I'm learning. I would say now that I'm turning 60, I'm finally figuring out how to deal with it. But yeah, when things go wrong, you just fix it. There's no other way that I can say to do it. I know we were in this valley again. We've got the ANA soldiers with us. We've got the 101st MPs with us. We're going to clean stuff. We're going to give away aid. Plus, I think we're going to give away weapons to the police in the Tagab Valley, which I told the civil affairs guys. I go, this is the most ridiculous thing.
Hold on, giving what?
We're going to give them weapons. The police.
Guns? Oh,
yes.
I see. Okay.
But we're in the Tagab Valley. I'm like, but the civil affairs asked us to go with them to help them pull security while they do this.
Yeah.
And I was like, I said, we're what? And I'm like, all right, it's your plan. We'll go with you. But we went in there one time with the 101st, and we're giving away food and clothes and stuff, and we just get swarmed. I mean, like.
Just everybody coming out?
They just come in, and I'm standing.
Is it because they want freebies?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, anytime. Yeah. They're always asking us to dig a well or do something. I'm like, what? You got 100 people? Dig your own damn well. I mean, I was not the most sympathetic guy in a lot of things, because the UN had been there forever, and they go dig a well and dig or what. I'm like, everybody's got a well. They got water everywhere. I mean, anyway.
So the swarming.
Well, like if we build a school, like the civil, and I don't mean to knock the civil affairs guys, but like we're going to go build a school somewhere. So we get the school almost built, and then the school burns down. Guess what? We're just going to pay to build it again, and this will happen a few times.
Right.
But anyway, and so they started swarming us, and I got on top of the Humvee with the loudspeaker, and I told and I basically stopped a riot by myself. And
that day?
Yeah, and the 101st Sergeant Major of the MPs, he said, and I never really thought about it. He goes, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen.
Because what did you do?
I don't remember, but I just know I got on the Humvee and I told I think I fired my weapon in there too.
Up into the air?
Yeah.
Oh, they probably respected that
to get some attention.
Yeah.
But and I told them if they don't line up in a
orderly
and
fashion.
I was cussing. But
well, how did they understand you? They didn't speak
my
English.
interpreter's next to me.
Oh, is he yelling on the loudspeaker?
And but I'm loud enough that they can all hear my tone. And so, but he goes, that was the coolest thing. He goes, I couldn't believe you did that by yourself. And I was like, what? That wasn't no big deal. To me, it didn't seem like a big deal.
Yeah.
But I think, and so with PSYOP, you have active duty and reservist always together.
So back up a little bit, because maybe people don't know. I didn't even know that was a thing. You were. Is it the department? I don't know what do they even call that? You were it's a corps.
So I started out on a tactical psychological operations team,
and they call it just PSYOP.
PSYOP. It's short for PSYOP.
Yeah.
And there was a movie made a long time ago with John Travolta called The General's Daughter or something.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
And they have this guy laying on a chair, and they've got electrodes hooked up to him, and he said, "Oh, the PSYOP guys are doing something." I'm like, that is nothing. That is not PSYOP. That may be PSYOP somewhere like deep in the bowels of somewhere, but it's not.
Yeah.
Not what we do. So there's all kinds of different psychological operations. There's the strategic stuff, which comes down from the White House down to the command, and we're not allowed to do it in America. We're not allowed to practice this on our citizens.
Sure, yeah. I'm sure that's true.
Yeah, well, we're not.
Yeah.
But the contractors that work in other places are.
Yeah.
But anyway, so
and its general thing is to alleviate or to control situations without weapons. Is that what you'd say, or what?
No, it's psychological operations were started like in World War II, like when you had a Tokyo Rose.
Yeah.
For the Japanese or whoever was coming out of Berlin.
Yeah.
And so it was to put out information, deception exercises like during World War II when they had the big balloons and tanks and everything,
Yeah,
and General Patton was going around talking about a division that he was not in charge of.
Yeah.
That was like a strategic PSYOP plan.
Yeah.
On the team level, the teams are usually like some of the first people up going in, and they want to go into different areas. And like if I'm working for the 4th Infantry Division or the 101st Division or one of the Special Forces groups, we're working for the colonel or the battalion commanders. And so they have a certain area, and the team is in that area doing whatever they can to help them either put out information, like deception. It's a whole host of things.
And they're getting, not only are they getting orders to do stuff, but they're getting requests and also thinking up stuff while they're there. Is that right?
Yes.
So it's kind of a mix of stuff.
Yeah, and when you go in, you introduce yourself to that brigade commander or that company commander, and you say, "This is what we can do for you. We can do this information." And so at the higher levels, they're coming up with a program for an overall area, and then for you working for that commander on the ground, you're coming up for what is going to work in this area. And so you've met like with village leaders or town mayors or wherever you're at, and so you're getting like, who's the key communicator in this place? This guy's he might be a little iffy, but we'll try to work with them, and like we'll put out posters where people are going to vote, or we're going to put out posters where we're going to blow you up in 6 hours, and if you don't do this or surrender, like in the beginning of these conflicts, which we did, or we're going to blow the hell out of you. And so it's all kinds of different things. Or even like we have different kinds of recordings, like we can have like 2 loudspeaker teams doing like tank sounds or artillery sounds, and so we could do that over here while somebody else is doing something over here. I mean, it's a whole host of stuff. Plus, the teams have to have the gunfighter skills to provide. Like a lot of stuff, we were on our own, so we're our own security.
And you said there were teams of 3, usually in 3.
Yeah, three men teams back then, and now we have females on the team. Just so when we go into certain places, like you do not see any females. Yeah. And they're not going to come out. And the only way is to have a female being able to go in and talk to them. But since they've changed, the rules because it's a combat deal, we're going to be, it's like an MP. They're going to have MPs that are in harm's way. And so the females will have to do all the same stuff that the males do.
So in Afghanistan, how many teams did you have under you?
Oh gosh, I can't remember.
Like 100 guys?
I had about 140 soldiers underneath me, and 70 of them had come from when we deployed to Iraq, and then they volunteered to go to Afghanistan because another company was supposed to go instead of us, but since of the op tempo in the beginning, they didn't have anybody, and so my battalion commander was asking me, goes, would any of your soldiers go? And I said, I'll go. And I'll ask them if they want to go, but instead of their flag, we're going to carry our flag, the 362 flag. And he said, that'll work. And so I called around to my different platoon sergeants and some of our captains, our detachment commanders, and I said, would you guys be willing to go to Afghanistan? We hadn't caught Osama.
Yeah.
And so, we'll go. Because, we were there when some of my soldiers were on the perimeter when they caught Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
In fact, they were living in a tent not too far. I used to tease them all the time. He was right over there. And they were like, and I said, you didn't find him. But they were so we got they were close to the spider hole and where all that was in the over there. And so for us, like, you remember that day.
Yeah,
when those planes flew in there.
Yeah.
And so for me, that's the whole reason should have been over there.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, yeah, we'll go. And it was totally different than Iraq.
What was the biggest difference?
The shooting. There was lots more shooting
in Afghanistan.
Yeah. And the terrain, like in Iraq, the highway system was pretty good. The highway and stuff. But in Afghanistan, everything was like super, super underdeveloped. The Chinese were building a highway
Yeah.
outside of Kabul, and they were building and we'd take that road and they'd get so damn mad at us because we'd move their barricades and drive
Yeah.
over their paved roads, and then people would follow us, and so pretty soon they're backed up. And I had a discussion with the Chinese guy on the crew, and I'm pretty sure it was their political officer, but I said, we're coming. We're going to use your road.
Tell me, it seems like in a war, in a weird sense, is like it's very bureaucratic on one hand. You have all these, right? You have these rules and regulations, and then on the other hand, it's just the Wild West where you have to take initiative, and you can't have your head in the books all the time about things because you just got it. Like you said, you have to get the stuff done, and it feels like it's a weird mix of those two things because to really do anything, you kind of got to think for yourself. And
yeah, but they frown on that. There's a lot of frowning on that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure.
So with tactical PSYOP, there used to be a lot of, and it's still, because it's totally changed. They've taken the reserves out of the special ops side and put them back on the big army side, and so it's got really, which it's not going to work. And I think they're trying to change it back. And so,
not going to work because what? It's too incestuous.
No, they take all the money. The big army on the reserve side takes all that special ops money that's put into the and you would hear people tell me, Tom, no, that's not happening. And I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it is. But we were still part of that, and so and when we went into Iraq, there was a lot of people at KPOC that were still in the mindset this is kind of be a training, blah blah,
oh, you mean what do you mean in training?
Like they just didn't have the mindset wrapped around a lot of the civilians because you have a lot of civilians.
Yeah,
they didn't have and so we reservists had to buy like the most good. We spent a lot of money buying like the best holsters because we weren't getting them issued.
Oh, you mean for yourself?
Yes,
your own personal money.
Yes.
Wow.
And so they gave us these green vests that were supposed to hold the ceramic plates.
Yeah.
But they didn't have plates for us. And we're going to go in we've been assigned to the 4th Infantry Division, and I'd been to training with them to war game like at Fort Leavenworth and stuff when their command is up there. So they give us these vests to wear, and I'm like, well, they're just hot. Why wear them? They don't have any plates
Right.
in them. And I had one of the sergeant majors from the active duty side, and he goes, why aren't you wearing? And we were still in Kuwait, and he said, why aren't you going to wear those vests? I said, because I don't have plates. He goes, what do you mean you don't have plates? I said, KPOC didn't give us the plates. He said, we'll get them when we get over here. He said, have you got them yet? I said, no.
Did you go in with plates?
Nope. We didn't get them until later.
That book, Generation Kill, talks about everyone was wearing those chemical suits. Did you do that when you went in?
So everybody thought we were going to be gassed.
Yeah.
So we had went through all the the shots. I can't remember which shot it was. One of the vaccinations, but we had to get a series of 6. And it's anyway that people complained about, and it burns when you get it. But we had to carry a protective mask. But pretty soon we're like, we're not going to wear that stuff. But in the first Gulf War, they had to wear that a lot because they thought that was going to happen. In fact, so the 4th Infantry Division was supposed to go to Turkey.
Yeah.
When we first went over there, so all of our equipment that we have with the 362 PSYOP company is on the ships with the 4th Infantry Division. So we had to ship our stuff down to Texas to Fort Hood to get on the boats to go around to Turkey. So the boats are going over to Turkey, and it's pretty rough seas. You see there's and one of our soldiers was supposed to go on the boats, but he didn't end up going. And it was a good thing because it was rough. But they get close to Turkey, and whatever kind of negotiations or whatever's happened, because the Turks want to open up all of our stuff.
And look at it?
Yeah, they want to look at it.
Yeah, yeah.
And basically we said no, and they said, well, you can't come here. And we're like, okay. So they turned the boats around and went all the way back around to Kuwait. So we are out in the desert with the 4th Infantry Division up on the border, but we have to get back and forth to Kuwait. So
and you don't have your stuff.
We don't have anything. And so there was an old bus that was out there in the desert that wasn't quite right, and my mechanic got running, so we just borrowed the bus. It's like
a Kuwaiti bus?
Yeah.
You just took stuff.
We just borrowed it.
Yep.
We didn't take it.
Okay, yeah.
And so we were driving back and forth. And so I'm down there, we're down there on the docks, and they said, well, your stuff's going to be here in such and such a day. And I'm like, really? So with this bus, I bring a lot of my people down there, enough people to get all of my stuff off the boats. So when the boats got there, on the one boat where our equipment was, there's a whole, it's a whole division's worth of stuff on different boats. They said, if you help us unload this boat, you can have your stuff. So we helped unload the boat. And after we get all of our stuff unloaded, this is actually kind of funny.
That sounds like total chaos, man.
We're there in the morning, and we got everybody lined up. And my mechanic Craig we have all new tires on our hump. We have all kinds of stuff. Because he got it for us.
Yeah.
He's like, we're gonna be ready to road march wherever we got to road march. So we get all our Humvees. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so we're just going to take off and head back up to where everybody's in the desert. But we were told, you can't do that. I said, why can't we do that? Well, the police have to escort. So we got some Kuwaiti police, and we got them to escort us, and they took us back up to the desert. And we drive in, and all the 4th ID people, they have no idea. There's nobody down there from the 4th Infantry Division, which was kind of funny. And they see all of us getting our stuff there, and like, hey, where'd you get your stuff? I said, the ships are there.
And they didn't know.
And so they sent.
They went and got their stuff.
They got anyway. We got all their stuff, and we got ready to road march up into Iraq. And the 3rd Infantry Division has already went. In the beginning of the war, they just blew through.
Is that the recon guys?
No, that was the 3rd Infantry Division.
Okay.
And the Marines are there too. The Marine guys, because the Marines were up into Crit when we got up into Crit, like.
So did you go? You went in right at the beginning.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the 3rd Infantry Division had already been there and went through Baghdad, and then the Marines were ahead of us, and we relieved the Marines into Crit. And then
what was that like?
I thought everybody thought, okay, this is it. We're good, got everything going, and then we're gonna go start assessing everywhere. So that's what we did as the teams. I got our teams spread out. The teams over like towards Bakuba, up in.
Kirkuk?
God, I can't believe can't.
You're 60, man.
Up in the north where the Kurds are.
Okay.
Kurdistan.
Oh, Kurdistan.
But it's not really called Kurdistan because the Turks don't like the Kurds and the Iraqis don't like the Kurds, and they're really not supposed to have their own country, even though, anyway. So we have teams up there, and the Kurds are coming down and stealing everything they can from the Iraqis. I mean, they're taking everything. They're taking down the power poles. I mean, we're getting blamed. I see on the news that, we don't have power and such and such. And I'm like, well, the damn Kurds are stealing everything. No wonder you don't have anything. But it never worked anyway, because in the palace complex, there's big Caterpillar generators and train air conditioners on top. So it didn't work all the time anyway. And if you plug something in the wall, it's 110. It could be 110, 220, or whatever. We had more fires in their electrical sockets. And so anyway, just a different thing. And then they started with the IEDs, and the IEDs started happening. And then the insurgency, and then it just kept getting more and more and more out of hand. And it wasn't a lot of shooting. There was shooting when we were there, but it was mostly a lot of IEDs and fighting IEDs.
IEDs being shot or in the road?
In the road.
Like setting up mines or...
Setting up mines. First, you'd see like wires coming out of a camel's butt or a donkey, and it was kind of crude, or like a garbage sack. And so these people that be out, we got more and more and more and more people, were showing up. If they saw a piece of trash, all these convoys would just shut down. Boom, stop.
Yeah.
And they call and we just drive by. And it's like, I ain't got time for this.
Yeah.
We just go by as fast as we could. Or we'd stop and see it was pick up the blast bag and wave it at everybody and drive on. And so just to get things done, we had to do things a little different, because we had to pull our own security, because it was a little, and the radios, we got given these Rathon radios that didn't work very good. So we didn't have really good radios. And so it was just different.
And then you were in Bosnia.
I was in Bosnia back, that's in 97.
And what was that like compared to Iraq and Afghanistan? And
So,
how long were you over there? How long were you in Bosnia?
About 9 months. So that was my first deployment as a tactical site, and I was a team chief, staff sergeant.
Yeah.
And there was an American.
Had that just begun?
No, they'd already been there about a year.
Okay.
I mean, and if you talk, and I'll tell you a story about that too. But I got to finish about that.
Oh yeah.
Why our radios were not working that night of the
in Afghanistan.
in Afghanistan was we'd been given this new thing called a Vulcan, and it was to disrupt the signals from IEDs, and we were testing it.
Oh.
And so it was a new thing. It worked really good, I'm sure, but it also didn't allow us to receive transmissions.
And you didn't know that going in.
We did not know. I don't think that anybody knew it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, but in Afghanistan, so you had the American sector, the French sector, and different sectors. And the American side, the soldiers got to wear all their battle rattle, as we called it, their helmets and all that stuff. In the international sector down in Sarajevo, we could wear our soft caps and shoulder holster, and that's it, and move around. So it was complete. And I feel very, very, very fortunate that I was assigned to Sarajevo. And so they had just built this new camp called Bootmere outside. I got to work with the Italians there and the Irish and the German PSYOP. In fact, I'm still friends with the German, who was the German lieutenant. He's now a doctor, and he was a neurosurgeon, some other stuff, but we're still friends. And it was a good training experience on how I thought PSYOP, because a lot of PSYOP people, especially, they just want to like airdrop 30,000 leaflets. And so I airdropped 30,000 leaflets, and I did a good job. But for me, learning on the ground as a tactical site, going in those villages or in those towns and talking to the different people, the face-to-face stuff, talking to somebody face-to-face, was a much better way of getting a message across and getting our message like on a radio, and radio broadcast, and hiring the local people to do it worked way better. But a lot of guys in their minds, well, if I dropped 100,000 leaflets, I did my job. You know, and seeing how that worked. Yes, it worked in some ways. It works really good, like on the initial deal. But once we're there, a lot of my PSYOP teams in Afghanistan and Iraq, they really made an impact on certain places, and in good or bad. And so, but mostly they really tried to make the perception of what we were doing there a good thing, or if we needed to be, a bad thing, you know, like we're going to get you. But I learned that for me, that worked way better than a lot of other stuff.
When you go to that, is there some underlying philosophy that with PSYOP that they go by? You know what I mean? Is there like an underlying principle that kind of shores that up?
Well, first of all, we're not supposed to lie. So anytime we put out any kind of information, it needs to be the truth.
Did you guys try and hold to that?
We try to do that. And so, like in Afghanistan, it's a very, like I said, not very many people can read.
Yeah.
So if you write a written message down, and your illustrator draws a picture, if you put that in a village that only the bad guy is reading it, like the
right,
he's reading it, he can make it say whatever. And so you have to be really careful. So we came up with these radio stations that we could Chinook in and put on a mountain, and we would get locals who spoke that dialect to put out that message in that area to try to, and so that worked pretty good. But then we had to hand out radios. And so we had these hand crank radios. Well, those worked really good at setting off IEDs. So they had to come up with another radio that didn't do that. And so, but you know, it's all about learning how to do it. And I would probably, a lot of people will probably, if they saw this, what I'm getting ready to say, they will say that I'm wrong. Especially people like in high positions of authority. So every year once we started this conflict, we switch out commands.
So why is that? Just they relieve people.
Remember in Vietnam, you guys spent 1 year in
country? Yeah.
So now we've done that, except we changed the whole command. Like when we did it there, like the people just changed. But now we switch, so everybody's getting their time in command of war stuff,
right?
Which is and all the things that come along with that.
Yeah.
And so we're switching out. And I know that, like when we were in Iraq, and General Odierno did a really, really good job in the 4th Infantry Division, and General Petraeus up in the north did a really, really good job of establishing what's what. But when you have the people come in and relieve you from the general on down, right. Well, we're going to win the war because you didn't. I mean, that's in right. the back of their minds.
They think they know better.
And so you tell them all this stuff,
yeah.
And it could be good stuff or it could be bad stuff, but then it's like starting over. We just start over. Every year we're starting over. And so
so if you're on the ground there and tasked with making stuff happen, it's just frustrating because
yes.
It's like everything people think they're going to come in and reinvent stuff.
Yes.
And everyone on the ground knows more than the people at the top, basically.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know that
I'm going to have you scoot that way just a little bit.
In the beginning, I attended some meetings. My commander was busy, so I had to go to the staff meetings with General Odierno, who later became the chief of staff. I'm a really, really smart guy. And I remember in the beginning, they were talking about how much food was in certain places. And I'd just been through this village and this place where this food was supposed to be, and there was nothing there. It was empty. And this person is in, and I believe it was a lieutenant colonel, was saying, well, such and such, and there's this much food and this much. And I said, oh, no, I was just there yesterday. There's nothing there. And they all looked at me.
Were they mad that you said anything?
And because they're like, we're going to make things green. Green means good.
Right.
We want everything green. Well, and I thought about that later. I go, this is why people got in trouble in Vietnam. We're going to make everything about numbers and about this, and it didn't work, did it?
So I did we did a story in Fort Hood. And it was around Fort Hood, where that is in Texas. And there was a guy.
Killeen, Texas.
Killeen. Terrible town. But there was a guy named Stacy. Loved this guy. He was and he started a thing with making canes for injured vets.
Yeah.
To get over his PTSD.
Yeah.
And it was funny. We'd go hang out with him, and he was awesome. And, it's 10 in the morning. He's smoking a cigarette. He's got his energy drink and has had his caffeine,
Mm-hmm.
He's just topped up, great guy. But it was interesting him talking to his buddies, and he was I don't even know what you call it, but he was a guy that would target things. So he would sneak in and hold the lasers onto stuff, right? And
FO.
Give those guys
Mm-hmm.
okay. And it's interesting talking to him, and I guess it's putting a little bit of what you just said in perspective, because he and his buddies, they were all beat up, really physically beat up and mentally beat up. They really missed the adrenaline of doing that. And I think what they missed even more probably was the brotherhood or the camaraderie of that, what it felt like to be a team and to have some purpose. More important than even the task itself, but more like this idea that
we're together.
We're a team.
We're together.
And they missed that. I could tell that was from all that adrenaline high of being out there, there really is a low, right? They're fighting that back. But I found it interesting too that almost all those guys they had a real distaste for the leadership. Like they felt like they were getting hung out to dry by the people in charge. But that wasn't really their motivating factor. And yet they can be disgusted about the leadership and the political implications of what happened. And yet they would all cut their arm off to go back out there in it. You know what I'm saying? Like I could tell they really missed that.
I was very dissatisfied that they did not catch Osama the year I was there. And when I came back, I was supposed to go to the Sergeant Major's Academy.
What year was this?
In 2006. And I hadn't seen my kids and family. And I really thought maybe I can make an impact as a sergeant major and get some of these people to change their minds on how they do stuff.
Yeah.
And Augustus was little, and I put on my uniform, and he said, "You're not leaving again, are you?" And I thought, no, I got to stay home. I got it, because even not deploying as a sergeant major in PSYOP, I would have been gone all the time. You're just gone.
Yeah.
Because your troops are spread out. They're overseas or deployed, or they're doing missions and other stuff, and you're just gone. And I thought, and the political stuff for me was just, I'm not political as far as I'm like, let's get the job done.
Yeah.
But the political stuff, just getting involved, I'm like, no, I'm not doing this. I'm going to get in trouble because I'll mouth off to the wrong person. And so I put in my 23 years, and I said, that's it. And so, but when we get together, like when we first got back, we'd like play softball together and stuff to kind of help us get through that time.
Yeah.
And that kind of helped. But so we were waiting. So in Afghanistan, the bad guys were set up in this village, this school buildings. We've got the ANA and all these different stuff. And I can't remember which special forces these Arab, what Arab country it was, but they're all with us, and we have the same radios that the bad guys have, that our guys use.
The same brand, you mean? Or
yeah,
what?
the same brand. Yeah, the same radio.
Yeah.
So we hear them all day planning on attacking us.
Yeah.
All day long. So we're just quietly going around, getting everybody spread out. So when they fire the first bullet, we're going to en masse. So I have this shoulder fired, and I believe it was a 90 millimeter, the recoilless rifle, and I'm going to shoot something with it. But you can't have anybody behind you. You can't have the back blast clear and all that. So I'm just kind of standing out, and so I wanted to get a good shot, and at something with this and blow it up.
Yeah.
And so all this bullets and stuff are flying, and I'm just standing there. I'm waiting. But I can't really get a good shot because I don't have, I don't want to just shoot without actually. So I didn't have anything. And one of my soldiers said to me, he said, "First Sergeant, don't you think you ought to get behind something?" And I was like, man, I need to probably retire. And I remember the major who is in charge of the guys from fifth group, and me and a fifth group captain had went into the village afterwards just to look because of our night vision capability stuff that we had. And he said to me, he said he didn't just blindly shoot, because a lot of people were just shooting.
Just shooting to shoot. Yeah.
And I said, no. I said, I didn't have a target. I said, "Do you ever go deer hunting?" I said, "You just shoot to be shooting?" And he looked at me funny. I said, "Didn't have a good target."
So did you have the big firefight that night then?
Oh yeah, everybody.
And did you just annihilate them?
We had no idea.
It just kind of just disappears.
It did. They were so surprised that as soon as they fired the first bullet, it just went. Whoop.
Huh.
And because we probably had over 100 people there that had weapons and they just all started everywhere. So yeah.
You made the statement to me yesterday. You never felt fear, or what did you say?
I did not feel fear for myself. I always felt fear that one of my soldiers would get hurt, and there wouldn't be anything that I could do about it. And I think that and so every morning I would pray, if this is my day, please take care of my family. And I rolled out. And especially in Iraq, with the IEDs, seeing people blown up in front of you or the bombs go off behind you. I mean, it was like all the time. And my soldiers were operating in that stuff all the time. And so I was out visiting my soldiers all the time. And that was my job, to take care of my soldiers. And so to make sure they get what they're supposed to get. But I was like, no, I never felt like I was going to die. I mean, and if I did,
Like that night, the night of the firefight you talked about when you were on the, you got ambushed. Mm-hmm. You didn't feel like you were going to die that night.
I felt I could have died. When I flipped down my night vision to run back into the firefight,
yeah,
I thought I was running back in to die. But I was not going to leave my soldiers there.
Yeah.
I was going to be with them. And so, yeah, that's just what you do.
So, okay, you told the story. I want to hit that story because I think that's such a funny story. Again, it goes to that kind of the chaos there. Was that Iraq where you you got the vehicles, or was that Afghanistan where you just...
No, that was Iraq.
Yeah, tell me that story.
So, when we went to Iraq in the very beginning, no up armored vehicles. We had soft top Humvees. Plus, our team guys had their Humvees with the loudspeakers mounted on, but no up armor. There's no up armor. There's no protection. So Craig, our mechanic, we're getting all this metal plating, and we're trying to weld it on some of the Humvees and all this. But the Humvees are not very fast. They're not a fast vehicle. And we had an MSQ, which is this and I can't remember all these acronyms and stuff, but it was an Humvee that had like sound systems and video stuff. We took that off the back of it and made it into a little pickup because it had a turbo.
Oh,
and it would go faster. So we thought we'd put but everything that we put on there, we could shoot through. And so we're like, that just slows us down. So piss on that. And so we were driving, and I'd seen off to the side were all these Toyota Land Cruisers and Nissan Patrols and these little Hilux pickups.
Were they all white?
They're all white.
Yeah.
And some of the little pickups had red stripes on them. They're white.
Toyota must make a killing on war stuff.
Well, they'd sold all these vehicles to Iraq before the war.
Oh, okay.
And Toyota makes these Toyota Land Cruisers that have a diesel engine and a 5-speed transmission standard, and they don't have emissions and stuff. And the undercarriages they're not like the undercarriages on the Land Cruisers we're buying here.
Huh.
And they get like 60 miles to a gallon.
Wow.
And so, but anyway, we didn't know that. But we're driving by there, and I see a guy guarding it, and I said, wait a minute, let's go back and see what this is. And I said to the guard, I said, he goes, oh, these are Iraqi guys. I said, well, who? Anyway, I said, we just borrowed some of them. And so
was it an American guy guarding it?
Yeah.
Oh, you just said we're going to take this?
Yes. And he's a PFC, and I'm a first sergeant. He doesn't know it. You can't see my rank.
Yeah.
But I just said that we're borrowing them, and you can call whoever. And so we drove out of there with those vehicles, and speed was the key. So driving fast. And in the beginning in Iraq, Saddam would not let people have a vehicle that was so many years new. So they had all these old vehicles that, like these old Toyota Land Cruisers, these were orange and they're kind of reddish and white. And there wasn't hardly anything on the road when we first got there because people weren't allowed to drive.
Right.
And so the roads were pretty clear, so it was really easy in the beginning to just haul ass. But as the people were getting cars, and I don't know who was bringing all these stolen cars in from Europe, but they started getting BMWs and Mercedes and these big vehicles, and they're going fast.
As the war went on,
this is in the beginning, yeah.
Wow.
And all these vehicles are showing up, and turn signals don't mean turn signals over there; they mean other shit. And so you never knew what was what, and there's always clusters in traffic, especially like if we're going down towards Baghdad or Bakuba. And so we just, drive around because we can.
Yeah.
And so we were in Baghdad, and this is where I had one of my flashbacks, and we were surrounded by vehicles, and it's just exhaust, bad, diesel, and it's hotter than blazes. And we're stuck in traffic.
And the traffic is U.S. military stuff?
No, the traffic is
there.
We're surrounded by civilians,
okay.
and so who knows?
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the heck is going on? So I had a major with me because we'd been around trying to survey some stuff and get some equipment for some radio stations. And I said, this way here, you guys hang on, I'm going to go see what the problem is. So I got out of the vehicle and just started walking through the traffic to see what's what. And I get up there, and they got bananas. And they hadn't had bananas in Iraq in a long time. So everybody's jumping out, and these banana guys are selling bananas, and people are getting bananas. And I'm like, oh. So
Did you get some?
Huh?
Did you get some bananas?
I got a couple bananas.
Were they good?
But I took them back, and my major was so upset that I'd been walking through the traffic, and I'd left them, and he was, and I'm like, it's all right, sir. We won't leave you again. And but I'm like, we're gonna get the hell out of this mess. And so we got out of traffic, and we made.
What'd you do?
I made people move.
Oh, you just went into rage mode and got them out of the way?
No, I wasn't raging. I was just telling people, I've got this rifle and you don't. And I'm going to move you out. Just let me by. And so we got by. But I remember he was so upset but I'm like, but I'm not going to sit here all day in this shit.
Yeah.
While people are buying bananas.
Yeah.
And and like red lights and stuff like that, or the cop up there when they started putting police up, that meant absolutely nothing. Every intersection was a cluster. And because it was just a mess. And I don't know how it was later, but people would give you these signals and all this stuff with their hands, and
is that like flipping you the bird?
Yeah, they flipped you off like this, or patience. This means patience and other stuff. But I was this means patience.
Huh.
And I was at the Walmart outside.
Hold it, that means like chill out?
Yeah, like it's okay, I'm getting there.
Oh, okay.
And so, and when I got back, so Fayetteville, Arkansas, through Bill Clinton, had the Middle Eastern Studies at the University of Arkansas, so King Fahd Middle Eastern Studies.
Yeah.
So there's lots of Arabs.
Yeah.
In Northwest Arkansas. And I was pulling out of the Walmart, and this lady was all dressed up and all her stuff around her. And she obviously cannot drive in America very good. And she's coming out of the Walmart parking lot, and she's doing this, and everybody thinks she's flipping them off, and they're all getting mad and flipping her off, and she's just trying to say patience, patience. But yeah, it was kind of funny.
Was it Iraq when you took the officer, and walked down the street without anything on? What's that was, tell me that story.
When we got up to the crit. And the Marines had been there, a few days, and we helped clear out the palace complex and all that stuff. And we'd been there, I don't know, a couple of days. And Alan Roper, who was a captain then, he was one of the detachment commanders.
Is this early on?
Yes, very early
okay.
on. This is like,
yeah,
the IEDs hadn't started yet.
Okay.
This is like when the first probably 10 days were there, up into Crit. And I said, come on, sir, let's go downtown. We'll go downtown, and we're just going to walk down Main Street downtown, walk down the middle of the street. We're going to take our helmets off, and we're just going to be friendly and wave to everybody. And I said, that will show them that we don't mean bad, and they will know what we look like. And he's like, really? I said, yeah. And, so we parked our Humvee on one end of the street. We had security down there, obviously, and I think maybe we had 2 Humvees. This is before we even had the Toyotas and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And we walked down the middle of the street, and we're just waving, and all the people were looking at us like we're nuts. I remember our interpreter said to us, he goes, they think when you have your sunglasses and your stuff on, you got X-ray vision, and that we have air conditioners built into that, because what kind of nutty people would be out there in this heat with all that shit on?
And what happened?
Nothing.
Did they wave? Did they wave?
Some of them did. Some of the kids waved.
Yeah.
I don't think they. They said we didn't invade them. We invaded them.
Oh yeah.
And so I wanted to show that we're not here to invade them. That we want to. I thought we were going to try to help. That was get rid of the bad guys and find the weapons of mass destruction and all that stuff. And
what's your takeaway from all that? Now that you step back and look at that. I mean, not your service, that's one thing. But what did you make of those wars now for you, Iraq and Afghanistan?
I don't know about Iraq. I felt like we should go to Iraq just based upon the stuff that we saw on TV, that that we're going to clean up this bad person and get them on the right track. I hadn't been. You go to cultural, because PSYOPs, we go to cultural training, so we know all the the nice things to do and the right things to do and the way to talk and all that, and get trained on how to use an interpreter. Anyway, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so we're gonna bring democracy to this country.
Are they telling you that in the?
Yeah, we're
in
going
your training?
We're going to set up. So like when we set up the newspaper and radio stations, we're training their journalists try to get 3 sources.
Oh, right.
When you find a story, and some of the people we hired had been on the papers before, and they're like, no, we just write the story. And I go, but you got to talk to people. You know, we had a guy, we got to make sure it's the right story. And it was like, why? And to get that across, some of them, you know, like got it.
Yeah.
But when you've been doing certain things a certain way.
Yeah, for sure.
And you know what? We have a strong man in charge of our country, and that's who we follow.
Right.
And that's the way it is. We've got
that's job security.
We got the sheik that's
Yeah.
in charge of this tribal area. That's who's in charge. We don't vote on it, and if we did vote on it, we all vote the same. Saddam's running, and that's who we voted for. And so changing that mindset, like even we did it in Bosnia, setting up elections and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Because Tito had been in charge,
Yeah.
you know, and he passed away, and then that's when the countries broke up.
Yep.
So we're teaching them, and it was the same thing there. They're not used. Like in America, we grew up. General Washington, those guys said to the English, "We're done." And so Americans have this certain kind of mindset. Well, I don't think we have it like we used to, but we're like, "I'm free. I'm free." And so people don't get that I'm free. They just want to eat and carry on and live and
Right.
and be in their life. And so you have to step back and go, okay, yeah, maybe that wasn't such a great idea. Like when we had afterwards and we had the Arab Spring and we got rid of all those people, what a mess we created.
Did you feel that same way about Afghanistan? How did Afghanistan, in your mind, feel different than
Well, that's
Iraq?
where they hosted, and that's where all the bad guys were going to get training. You know, in the
in Afghan. Oh, yeah, before.
yeah,
Right. Against the Russians.
You know, because Osama was a Saudi who came from a very, very wealthy family who did not believe like they did, even though they funded him, and so and then so when some of our agents talked to Osama when we were fighting, the Russians were still there.
Yeah.
And we were supplying, he was fighting the Russians.
Yeah.
Because it was just another white person
Yep.
to go fight. And he told them when we're done with the agent that was supplying them, he said, well, when we're done with them, we'll start with you.
Right.
And so we knew this guy. I mean, we had the chance to get him and we didn't.
Right.
And so I think soldiers, for the most part, we're just fighting for each other once we get over there and just to get through it. And I went over there with I was idealistic.
Idealistic.
That I want to get this guy who trained those people to fly into our buildings. That was my mindset. And if I have to do it this certain way, that's okay. I mean, not like I'm personally going to get him,
for sure.
but we're going to be part of the getting
Right.
or finding. But he was already hiding in Pakistan, and so and that was, you know, that borders the only okay. And then this is another. I used to tell this to people after I said if we'd have just put a small nuclear warhead in that Tora Bora and blew the shit out of it, then that'd have been that. And it wouldn't have spread all over, but oh no, we can't. We're gonna go fight nice. We're gonna hand out money and hope everybody likes us, and that's what we're gonna do. And the only way to win a war is to kill all the people you're fighting. And sometimes they kill civilians too. Sherman did it when he marched through the South. We did it in Europe. We bombed the Germans' cities until they wanted to give. And we have not fought a war like that since. And that's Tom Bercher.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Been on the ground, done that.
What, and I'm curious your reaction, but other people, I'm sure you guys talked. What did it feel like when we just left Afghanistan the way we just did? And for the guys that fought over there, I can only imagine what that.
I thought we just did Vietnam all over again. We just did, and I know somebody whose son was killed over there, and soldiers that died there. And what was the purpose of that?
Yeah.
What, you know, why? And then we also had the civilians there that we brought in, and they're fighting against their own country people. But what did we accomplish there? Well, we armed the heck out of the bad guys. That's what we
pretty
did.
crazy.
We
Pretty crazy.
armed them, and yeah, what a mess, huh? And it'll come back to haunt us. I mean, the Vietnamese, everybody wants to go there on vacation now, and everybody says how good the food and stuff is. So maybe in 30 years we'll go to Afghanistan and we'll eat some goat sandwiches, and everybody will be like, "Oh, let's go get high and get some heroin in Afghanistan." I don't know. That's kind of flippant of me to say that, but I don't know. But right now, we're probably still sending them money.
Did you ever hear the rumors? I wonder if you ever saw that. There was stuff going around that as soon as we went back in there, that there's stuff of American military guarding poppy fields. Did you ever?
Actually, one of my soldiers went back there as a contractor, and his job was to destroy poppy fields.
To destroy poppy fields.
Yes, and he said it was like trying to destroy hay fields. There are just so many of them, and that was such an
That's their.
We didn't have a solution for the farmers to not grow poppies because that's what they've been growing. I mean, so on Thursday night with the Afghan army, that's like their Friday night.
Yeah.
It's party time. And they're out partying, and they're smoking weed, and they're doing all the things, and all the things. And it was just dumbfounded. I was just dumbfounded by it.
Just to see that.
I remember, okay, so.
Because that doesn't, honestly, that doesn't compute the way we think about.
Right. So we have the Afghan army with us.
Yeah.
And I am directing them in this one place, and I have their colonel. We provide the food. We trucked them out. We hired civilian trucks. In fact, one of the civilian truck drivers didn't show up, and they were holding us up, and I drove the civilian truck.
Yeah.
Until they got a driver for it.
And
because we had to wait. I'm like, no bullshit.
Yeah.
And so I told them, the HHC, First Sergeant Utley, his name. I said, I'll drive that truck. He says, you can drive that truck? I said, I can drive that truck. So you get in this big jingle truck, and it's got all the, stuff on it. And I felt perfectly safe in that truck. But anyway, we armed all of them. And so I don't know. What was the question? I lost my train of thought there. I thought something else.
Oh, you were just talking about how on Thursday nights they would party.
Oh, yeah. And so anyway, so we provide the food, but we hire a cook and all that stuff, or they hire.
Oh, you mean to do the celebrate?
No, to do the mission.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
But it's Thursday night, so they think they're going to have off. I have this old grandpa guy with a 12-year-old kid, a little kid with us, little boy, and the colonel's guy, and the little boy disappears.
The Afghan colonel. Oh.
Yes, and the little boy disappears, and I'm like asking, "Where's the little boy? Where's this little boy?" I'm like, "Where's he disappeared to?" Because he's supposed to be helping Grandpa cook the food. Look, he's with the colonel, and I'm
That's
like,
disturbing.
Yeah, it was, and I said, no. So I sent one of the Afghans with my turf. I said, you go get that little kid and tell him he's coming the fuck out of here. And the colonel comes back, and he's wearing Ray-Ban sunglasses. The pilot ones like Tom Cruise wears.
Yeah.
He's got those on. It's dark.
How old's that guy?
I'm saying probably 50s, maybe.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
They look a lot older than they are.
Yeah.
And he's got his Ray-Bans on. And I said, "Oh," he goes, I said, "What's he doing up there?" And he wouldn't give me a straight answer. And I said, "Well, he's not going to go back up there." And he goes, "But I am Colonel such and such, and I've been on CNN." And I said, "Well, that's nice, but the kid ain't going back up there." And I got all in that, and I got all in that grandpa, that he made a money deal with the grandpa for this kid. And I was like, but that was pretty normal. They put women on such a pedestal, like the A&A guys are with each other. But it's not gay. It's just because they can't get women, which I don't know how you explain that, but that's just the way they were. And I remember when we were getting ready to go over there, we had some instructors from the Defense Language Institute that speak Pashto and Dari, and they came and were to Arkansas and were giving us classes, and basic stuff, and they said there's a tale that if you are in Kandahar, when the birds fly over, they fall to the ground. And I said, why is that? And he goes, because they put their one wing behind their butts. I said, and I was like, and then after I was over there a while, I was like, oh, now I understand.
So you weren't informed about that before you went over?
Yeah, I was informed, but I didn't know it was that rampant.
You didn't know it was.
You don't.
And that's just a cultural thing.
That is a cultural thing.
Wow, that is whack.
That is because you can't have a woman until you're married, and it's they're pretty strict about it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can't afford to get married. Getting married, you got to give up the dowry and all that stuff, and a lot of people just can't afford it. So it's not what I would call what I want to do.
And unlike way more than Iraq, right? Afghanistan's just these separate little. It was never a cohesive country, right?
No, even when they had a king,
it's little pot shots of people, and they hate each other,
right?
Village to village. It's not like a unified place, and nor has it ever been. I don't think.
I think so. If you can ever go see it, there was a guy named Masood. They called him the Lion of the North.
A political guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is at the end and before 9/11.
Was it the one-eyed guy?
No. He's pretty tall. He was, and he wore the round hats. It was a thing. And anyway, he was uniting all of these people. First, he was doing it with the Russians. Later on, when they were left, but then he was getting them all united, and that Osama, like the day before 9/11, sent a guy in there with a bomb strapped to him and blew him up.
Oh, I remember that.
And
I remember that.
He
happening.
probably we tried to find his guys when we went in initially, to get them going, and we found God, I can't even think of his name. That became the president. He was a warlord, and his brother was a warlord down in the south.
Yep.
And we brought him north.
Yep.
God, Karzai.
Yeah, Karzai.
We brought him north, and he was just a warlord.
Yeah.
But even when the king was there, the king was only in charge of stuff close to Kabul.
Right.
And that was it.
Yeah.
It's a very, very, just like Pakistan's probably a little bit more because they have the army there.
Yeah.
And that army's pretty with it. But the Afghans, no.
Yeah.
There was no, even after we were there and we spent all these billions of dollars in Kabul, and we were supposed to spend all this money and put a sewage system in that town. You remember you were talking about the 5-star hotel?
Yeah.
Yeah, it may have had, sewage ran down the middle of the street.
Openly.
In ditches.
Wow.
Just like,
in Kabul?
Like medieval times, yeah.
Wow.
Which is supposed to be the most sophisticated city over there.
Yeah.
And if you see pictures of that place in the 1970s or Beirut or any girls in mini skirts, long hair, and something happened that changed.
Yeah.
And I don't know what happened in all those different places. I remember my uncle was in the Navy, and he said going to Beirut was the coolest place to get shore leave. And then these people...
That probably is the lesson. It's harder to build something than to tear it down, because once you destroy it...
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Probably took a long time to get those built up to that. And then...
Yeah. But anyway,
So you have 2 sons.
Yep.
They joined the military.
Right. My oldest is a infantryman, 11 Charlie, mortarman in the 82nd Airborne. He was in basic when COVID happened.
Yeah.
He had an airborne contract, so he's going to go to airborne school, and then he was supposed to be stationed in Italy in the 173rd Airborne Brigade. Everything stopped. In
the military too.
Everything. Yes.
Wow.
It was. Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. So he gets to Fort Bragg, which is the 82nd, home of the 82nd Airborne, home of the Special Operations Command. It's the hub of all this stuff that's been happening.
Yeah.
He gets there on his birthday, which is May 7th. He gets told he's going to Syria in 2 weeks, and that really blew me away. I didn't know it, but it just...
Hold it. In what sense? What blew you away?
I thought there's no way in hell that he's ready to go anywhere and fight anybody.
Because how old is he at that time?
He was 19.
Okay.
He turned 19 on that day.
And they sent him to Syria?
No, they said they were going to Syria.
Yeah.
And so that's when I had horrible anxiety. I got up and I couldn't stand up, and I kept falling over, and I thought I had some kind of weird COVID, and it was anxiety. All of it just came. My dreams now have my son in them with the wrong uniform. So that's when it came to a head in my head.
All
My PTSD.
Yeah.
Because I'd kept it under control. I thought I'd kept it under control. My kids and family probably tell you that I'm not under control because there's my dad speaking it with his southern accent really good. So Gus gets told that, and so he said, I'm going to be able to have a few days off in such and such time. And so I think it was like in June, Rebecca and I went to Fort Bragg. And
2020?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Fort Bragg is a mess. Soldiers have long hair. They don't have to report. They're just, if you live off post, you're not coming on post. They're not doing PT. They're not doing anything. There's cigarette butts.
No discipline, no nothing.
It's just a mess.
Wow.
It's just a mess. From the eye, looking at it from the eye view. And Gus really hasn't, he's got his stuff, but he's not going to have to go to Syria now because he didn't go through the initial training with the guys that were going. And but I was like, and I talked to my friend I told you about, and Mike Ciroli, and I think when you see it every day and you don't see the deterioration, like coming in after knowing what Fort Bragg looks like normally, and what soldiers in the 82nd Airborne look like normally, that was not normal. They've now since cleaned it up and straightened it up, and it's like, it's Fort Liberty now.
Geez, that's weird.
But
I think
it was weird.
Was it because of COVID?
It was because of COVID.
They just let everything fall.
So my son was supposed to go to airborne school.
Yeah.
So he's in basic training.
Yeah.
And he's going to go to airborne school, then go to Italy. Rebecca's already planning her vacations. And so then when they stopped all PCSs, which is people moving from post to post, the whole military. They stopped. Everybody from Italy is stuck in Italy. If your stuff is shipped out, you're not going. If you're supposed to go to an officer training course, you weren't
going.
Everything stopped. It stopped. And so Augustus is sitting at Fort Benning, graduated from basic. They let the National Guard guys go home that were in basic training with them, but the active duty guys, they're like, no, you're not going home. You're going to sit here. So they built these big fest tents, these big white tents, and they're just going to put them in these tents and hold them until they figure out what's what. Luckily, the general in charge of Fort Benning at the time said, well, we've got the airborne school here, and we've got all these kids in basic, and all these people that are supposed to go to airborne school that are here, they're going to go to airborne school. But the airborne school is going to do it under COVID rules, so they're going to wear a mask and do all this stuff, and they're not going to. So Augusta, and I went to airborne school when I was 31, and it's supposed to be physically hard. You're supposed to be able to do this many push-ups, this many sit-ups, pull-ups, the whole shoot match, run this fast, and do all this stuff. And they're supposed to give you a physical fitness test. Even if you graduated from basic, then you go and take an airborne physical fitness test. So I told Gus, you got to get ready. And Gus is kind of tall. He's like 6'2", so he's kind of lanky. So pull-ups are hard for him. And so I'm like, he's not going to get through that. I mean, I knew he would, but I was like, it's going to be hard. He's going to have to really, and they didn't push him in basic. We were supposed to go to his graduation, and we were not allowed to because of COVID. So we had to watch it on video, and I'm looking at the drill sergeants, and the soldiers, and the drill sergeants are not like the drill sergeants that I remembered from Fort Benning, and when I was a drill sergeant, lean and mean, and their uniforms were pretty snug. And I'm like, oh my gosh, because it's just a mess.
Yeah.
And so Gustus and all these kids get sent over to the airborne school, and the blackhead said, yeah, we're supposed to do PT in our mask and all this shit. Piss on that. We're not doing it. They didn't do a PT test. They didn't do anything.
Wow.
They said, so the only time that they did any physical training was when they ran to do the training. Then they did the training, and then they were done at like 2:00 every day. And I remember it was like from 04 until chow time that night.
Right.
You're doing something. And but I was like, Well, there you go.
Well, you said when you got in, when you first enlisted, the Army was transitioning away from being like that, right?
No, when I was a drill sergeant.
That's what. And well, I thought you said from the Carter era.
Oh, well, from the Carter era. So if you see any of like the drill sergeant films from like when in the Carter era, after the when
Late
people get home,
70s, yeah.
late 70s. So the drill sergeant's got these big old mustaches, long hair. There's even one where one of them's patting this female on the backside
In a movie?
in training films.
Oh my gosh!
And I'm because we had to see these when we were in drill sergeant school, and but so when I went in, I joined the military in 1982, and I went to basic in 1983. So Ronald Reagan had been, and remember the old pickle suits, the green.
Yep.
They're transitioning over. Now we're getting camouflage uniforms. So we got green uniforms and the camouflage uniforms when we were in processing.
Yeah.
So I get sent. I'm in the infantry. I do infantry basic training. And I go through 11 Bravo training, graduate from that 13 weeks, and then I get selected to be an 11 Mike, which is a brand new vehicle that's replacing the old armored personnel carriers. It's got a 25 millimeter chain gun and the 240 Bravo machine gun, and so I get sent to that school afterwards at Fort Benning, which is in the old World War II barracks. Then it became something much different, and I get sent to Fort Hood. And we're in the field over 200 days a year. I'm in Bravo 141 Infantry, which has actually got a pretty good record.
Doing training, 200 days a year.
To fight the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan. And so they are pumping money into the military, training, all the different things. And we're going to fight the Soviet Union. And so that's how we trained to fight them. But when those guys, and there was a lot of professional soldiers, because I had senior NCOs that were Vietnam guys that had stayed in. In fact, my first sergeant, E.G. Barrera, had gotten a Silver Star from Westmoreland in Vietnam. And E.G. used to say, "You guys are going to run, and if I have a heart attack, just come and kick me." But I mean, it was pretty serious. I wasn't as serious as I could have been, but I did earn my EIB, which is the Expert Infantryman's Badge, as a PFC. My son will tell you, who has not got it yet, that it's really hard to get because you have to do all these tasks, and our company did really good at that. But when you saw what it was like, the morale from you still heard guys talking about like the Iran hostage thing.
Yeah.
And that was one of the first big joint missions.
Yeah.
When everybody was, but it wasn't cohesive yet.
Yep.
But that's where we got our Delta Force. That's
Yeah.
when Delta Force started.
Yep.
And so our Army transitioned to what I thought, after seeing some of the leftover as a youngster, and I'm just a kid.
Yeah. How old were you when you joined?
I was 17 when I joined.
Wow.
I was 18 when I went to basic.
Yeah.
I'd graduated from high
Man, you
school.
were young.
I was a kid. But I was not college material. I knew that I should not waste anybody's money going to college. So my best friend had joined the Army, and so I went and talked to a recruiter, and he said, we're giving $8,000 to join the infantry. And I said, the ground pounders, the dog faces, because I know what that stuff was from World War I. And he said, I go, $8,000. And this 1983, I'm like, I'm in. So I got $5,000 in the initial payment when I graduated from basic.
Wow.
And when I got home, I got a 1982 Z28 with the new
nice.
model. Yeah. It had, I don't know, it was used like 10,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
And away I went.
That was a cool car, man.
It was a cool car.
Oh, yeah.
Had a lot of fun with that. Had a 305 in it. Yeah, it was white, blue stripe, louvers.
So go back. How do you feel about your boys signing up? What do you?
Oh, yeah. So Augustus, I wasn't really sure. Augustus, so I have Augustus and Seamus.
Yeah.
Augustus and Seamus can both read stuff and memorize it from plays when they were little. They knew everybody's lines and their own lines.
Yeah.
Augustus is a lot like his father. Can read really good, can remember everything he reads, but just not a great student.
Yeah.
Seamus is like his mother. School was no problem, straight A's. Everything was easy. They both played guitar. Gus is in there picking, learning slow. Seamus right away. So two different, but both really smart.
Yeah.
Just both
come at it from
different.
different ways. Yeah.
So Augustus said to us when he was in school, he goes, I think I'm going to join the Army. I go, you sure about that? And I wasn't sure about that.
Yeah.
Rebecca said, okay, what do you want to do? Well, I don't know. She goes, well, why don't you call your Uncle Dan? Because Rebecca thinks Augustus needs to go learn how to drive a bulldozer or drive trucks or something like that in the Army.
Right.
And I'm like, no, you don't really learn how to do that stuff. Like, no. I'm like, if you're gonna join the Army, be a gunfighter.
Yeah.
That's what you need to be. If you're gonna go be the hua stuff.
Yeah.
And so he called his Uncle Dan. And Dan had been an armor officer and in the military, but he was assigned to the infantry. And so he said, what do you want to do, Gus? And Gus said, I want to jump out of airplanes. And he said, well, that's what you ought to do then. So, but the local recruiter, which was from Cody, tried to say, well, we don't have any positions and all this. And I said, look, I said, Augustus, I said, I'm retired first sergeant. His mom was staff sergeant. She was an intel person. I was infantry, then tech PSYOP. And I said, the contractor's going to say what the contract's going to say, or he's not going. So he goes, well, we don't have any airborne contracts right now. And I said, all right, not going. So Gus took off to the horse camp in Roosevelt in Yellowstone and worked at the horse camp.
Yeah.
And the recruiter called and said, I got an airborne slot, but he's got to be there in August. And I said, all right. Gus, I said, you're not going to be able to stay there all summer. You're going to have to go to, and he goes, all right. So they got him an airborne slot. They gave him a big bonus, like $15,000.
Wow.
And he's in the 82nd.
Does he like it?
He just reenlisted. He's supposed to go to Italy. He reenlisted. I said he wanted to reenlist, but he wanted to reenlist. If he reenlisted, they're not giving bonuses to the people that are in. They're giving bonuses to people trying to get them to come in. Anyway, so I said, well, at least get something you want. And I said, so they had a new airborne division up in Alaska, the 11th Airborne Division.
Yeah.
Or he could go back to the 173rd. Because if you're going to stay airborne, you don't have many choices. There's a battalion in Germany, which is part of the 173rd. But anyway, he got Italy. So he reenlisted, and in about a year, he's supposed to go to Italy.
Oh, wow.
And so he's pretty excited about that. Now, Seamus, on the other hand, who already had scholarships, I think he probably could have went to Wyoming University for free. He won the state science fair and something. Grades are A's, no effort. Everything's easy.
Yep.
I am in California working on the wall during 2020.
Yeah.
Seamus is a senior in high school. His senior year in high school is all Zoom, and he's doing speech and debate. It got so boring, he didn't want to do it anymore. His teacher was kind of upset with him. He goes, I'm not doing it on Zoom. What's the point in that? That's not fun. I mean, he did it, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
But anyway, so Seamus comes home one day and says to his mom, goes, I think when I graduate, I'm going to travel. I'm just going to travel around. And so his mom says, well, how are you going to travel? And he goes, well, you guys will pay for it. And she goes, no, we won't. And he goes, well, I don't feel like going to college. I don't want to go through any more school. And she goes, well, what are you going to do then? Because I'm thinking about the military. And this is a conversation that I heard from Rebecca.
Yeah.
And I said, no way. Seamus is going to go. There's no way that kid is going in the military. She goes, he wants to go in the military. I said, no. And so he goes, I don't want to do that hua stuff. I don't want to do the physical. No, not doing that. And so she goes, well, you need to probably get a foreign language. And he goes, that sounds good. He goes, I'm going to join the CIA. I'll go and do this, and then I'm going to join the CIA. Because Rebecca was recruited by the CIA.
Yeah.
She was on her third interviews because of her Farsi language. And so she knows a little bit about that. And she goes, well, so he looked on there, and she goes, you can do PSYOP, you can do civil affairs, you can do intel, but you got to pick which one you want to do.
Yeah.
So he looked at all the ones. He didn't want to be on a boat. He certainly didn't think that he was going to be a Marine. And he goes, I'll be in the Air Force. And so they had one slot for the Mountain West area for what he does in the Air Force. And they chose Korean. He passed all the languages. And so he went to the Defense Language Institute after he graduated from basic. and now he's learning how to do his job, which is he's an airborne cryptolinguist and speaks Korean, and he's doing really good at it.
You started telling me when your other boy joined, it really hit you.
Yes.
What was that?
After being in the deployments, and we super trained hard. I mean, like, I made sure we were ready to face what we're going to face. And having been through Bosnia, I kind of had a little bit of idea, that helped me get ready for these other things. And so lots of range time, lots of crew drills. When things go wrong, just like the night we got ambushed, all of my guys did everything they were supposed to do, and they lived. That was a miracle, though. I know that was a miracle on many ways. Gus has went through basic, and I thought his basic was kind of shoddy. I don't think. So now he's going, and they're just saying you're going to Syria. And I'm like, he didn't know shit. But, that's what happens when you join the military. You just go, and some people make it, some people don't make it. But in my mind, he was not making it. And it just blew me apart. And so in my dreams that I would have, he was in my dreams, but he's in the wrong uniform, and I couldn't figure it out. And that's what caused me problems. And I'm over it now. He's as my wife says, he's a grown-ass man. He's 6'2". He's an airborne trooper. He's been there a while, and so he knows his job. And so that's all I can hope for.
Horses play a role in helping you come straight with what you needed to deal with,
yeah.
Right?
So I've always been around horses ever since I was little. When I was a kid, when we were training horses, if you ever see that John Wayne movie, The Cowboys, where they rope and the kids just get on and they make it work, that's how I learned to ride. You just get on and make them. My friend in Arkansas taught me about groundwork.
Groundwork?
Where you get the horse ready to understand what you're doing.
Yeah.
And so I knew a little, I got to where I could do that. I was pretty proficient at that. But I started understanding horse language. I didn't understand horse language before. Horses were just a tool when I was a kid. I mean, we liked them. We had our favorites and all that, but it was just a tool. And so I learned being around horses, well, they're pretty intuitive. And so when I was on the wall and I went out to Saddles and Service and I saw what they were doing out there, and
explain Saddles and Service.
Saddles and Service is an organization in Southern California that uses horses to help people with PTSD come to terms with what they have. And so to go into a round pen with the horse with anger, anxiety, and all that stuff, it teaches you how to release that so you can get that horse to work with you. And horses, like if I walk into a round pen and I'm in like a super angry, that horse is going to have its ears back, not going to come to you. I mean, you can get him to do it, but it's all going to be reluctant. But when you get that horse to come to you and it's just coming to you because it wants to become to you, that helps people in a really, really strong way. And so I went there when I had some time and worked with some of their horses and on my free time, and they just told me to come and work whenever I didn't have to.
How did you find out about them?
I saw them on Instagram about, I think, in late 2018, and I just kind of followed them peripherally. And so when I went and worked on the wall, I sent them a text. I'm like, where in Southern California are you? I get a text back, San Diego. And I'm working in Alpine, which is east of San Diego.
Right.
And I said, okay, where in San Diego are you? I'm like, why didn't you just say all this in the beginning? But anyway, so then I get a text back, Alpine. I'm like, oh, well, I'm in Alpine. Where are you in Alpine? And so I said, well, actually, we're in Yapatul Valley Road, which is not Alpine. It's even further east. And I'm like, so I went out there and met Mike and Tammy, and I said, I'm working on the wall. I'm working 7 days a week. I have very little time, but if I do have some time, I would like to come and just hang out. And so they had a couple of horses that were kind of running people out of the round pen. One of them was spinning people. And so I went there on a Sunday evening and worked both those horses. And I guess they were watching.
Yeah.
And they just told me I could come back anytime. I don't have to make any appointments. Just come back and get a horse and do what I want. And so that's basically what I did. And it helped me get through my time there. And that was when I almost drove off a bridge, which I told you guys that story before, because I just had so much stuff going on in my mind all the time. I could not. My mind.
You think that was just kind of a buildup of everything that had happened, and you just hadn't dealt with it?
I just hadn't dealt with it. So,
and if you were going to describe PTSD to somebody, what is that?
Post-traumatic stress. You have constant anxiety. You're in and out of depression. A lot of anger, and a lot of people like go out with their anger. I brought a lot of my anger in, and so, I didn't realize it, but I yelled at my kids and wife a lot.
And you just didn't see that.
And I just didn't see it. My kids would tell you, my kids used to call it the Vietnam face.
Yeah.
And so, but it all. When Augustus got told he's going to Syria, I couldn't shut down. I could not shut my mind from racing because in the back of my mind, that was there. And then all the things that I've seen and all that stuff, it just came to me.
It just all flooded
back in. And I
in.
thought, I'm not going to get this fixed. I'm not going to be able to fix this. And so I thought, if I kill myself, it'll be over. And that'll be pretty quick. And I wasn't scared of dying.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, and I wasn't going to leave a note. I was just going to have an accident while I was texting. That was
so people wouldn't know.
So people wouldn't know. But then I thought, I'd started treatment before at the VA in Sheridan.
Yeah.
And they started me on a program where I relive a certain moment.
Yeah.
And I work my way, and you basically make that you change the way that happened. And for my mind, like the high alertness, I can't let that. I still can't let it go.
Yeah.
I live up here on top of this hill. I have a 360 view
Yeah.
all around me.
Yeah.
When in Arkansas, when we started building our home, we converted our old farm, our rock house. I built a rock wall out on the end of my driveway that was this high.
Right.
And my wife said, "When am I going to stop?" I'm like, "When I run out of rocks." Because when we were digging, it's a sandstone shelf, so I had rocks like half the size of a truck that I was pushing out there with the backhoe,
right.
And I was building it up, and I didn't know it, but I was forting up.
Yeah.
Subconsciously, I was forting up. I bought an AR-15 that resembled my M4, and it slept next to me. I slept with my pistol, and so because somebody's going to come get me, and I'm going to be ready. I couldn't get over that somebody's coming.
Yeah.
And in Afghanistan, Iraq, I knew I was surrounded by soldiers, and they're on guard, so I could sleep good. I didn't have any worries. But when I came home, I didn't have anybody standing guard, and so I was putting everything else on guard. And so I could still physically run. I was still able to, but my Achilles are messed up.
Yeah.
And so I could run out a lot of that stress. I mean, I ran. When I ran a long ways. And so that helped fight a lot of that stress. But when I was supposed to do a clinic the next day at Saddles and Service. And it was like, when I was driving and I was going faster and faster, and I'm like, I'm going to do it. And I got out the phone and I'm like, I'm going to text. I'm like, no, not my wife, not my kids. I'll just text somebody from work. And then I'm pretty sure that God intervened because I started seeing my kids and my wife. And like, I was picturing them at the funeral and like, they're going to know. Because I started my treatment at the VA. So VA started, so they had me focus on one thing.
Yeah.
And I couldn't focus on one thing. I said, I saw too much stuff, and it's all over. It's overwhelming me. So the treatment they started me on made it worse.
Yeah.
And then they gave me a Lexapro derivative, which in some people they say causes them to commit suicide. What it does is clear your thinking so you can plan better. Basically, what it does. And so after that, yeah.
Did you feel like your suicide was did you think you would be just getting out of the pain for you, or was it that you thought you were a burden on other people?
No. I didn't think I was a burden.
Yeah.
I didn't think I was a burden. What I was irritated that I had this cycle in my brain
that you just couldn't shut off.
I couldn't shut off.
Yeah.
And I was going to shut it off.
Yeah.
I didn't sleep much. I couldn't exercise like before because of my body was just not working like it should.
Yep. So that stress relief,
and
you couldn't.
I couldn't get it that way.
Yeah.
And I thought, this will just be easy. This will be easy. And then my family will still get my insurance money because they'll be in doubt. They won't know. My family. When I was seeing them, like, they're gonna know. They're gonna know. They're gonna know.
And is that what you didn't? Did you slow down after that, or what?
I hit the brakes right before if you went there, you would have seen the skid marks.
And when you come to a stop, are you in a sweat?
I was sweating. My heart was racing. My mind was racing. I was shaking, and I've talked about it enough now that I'm like, oh, thank you, God. And then
was that? Did you feel an instant change at that point?
No.
It's just that it just stopped that moment.
I'm okay. I'm not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was scary. I was super scared. One time that's the one time I was scared because I thought I almost did it. I was that close. I understand how people can do this.
Yeah.
And so I went on back. My sister-in-law, I talked to her. She had no idea. And when I told the story on
the show,
yeah, they're like, how can you just be normal? I'm like, well, I haven't been fucking normal, and I don't know how long. Let's start now. That's just the way I haven't told anybody anyway. Because if you would have talked to most people, I'm always laughing and smiling, trying to make people laugh and smile. And I had that clinic the next day at Saddles and Service, and I went there, and there was 2 guys there that were on the verge, and after the clinic they weren't, because somebody and what amazed me was all the people that are doing this.
What do you mean?
Committing suicide, and having the same thoughts, and maybe not like my thoughts, and maybe not my trauma, but I used to discount people and their trauma because I'd seen all this shit, and people like would tell me, and I'm like, what that shouldn't cause PT. That's nothing.
Yeah. But
it doesn't matter because your trauma is not my trauma, and my trauma is not your trauma, and what affects you doesn't mean that's any less.
Right.
And that's what I kind of told people the other night at that dinner was you don't have to go to war to have PTSD.
Yeah.
You can have PTSD from all kinds of things.
Yeah, for sure.
And so that helps me to help other people. I'm not a psychologist. I've said that to you guys before. I'll listen. I don't try to make people talk to me when they come out here if they just want to ride a horse. But usually on about day 3, some people want to talk, especially when they've been really, really hurting. And so I understand that hurt. My oldest son, in a conversation with Rebecca, not long, he said, because he was supposed to go somewhere else, he said, if I have to go over here, and he goes, if I get hurt, he goes, Dad's not going to kill himself. He was worried about if something happened to him. And I'm like, no, son, I'm not. I still, that thought will come in there, but I've trained myself, because that thought becomes a habit.
Yep.
That thought is there, and you're like, focusing and planning and pretty soon it's just part of who you are. And so my therapist is helping me to push that away. Now I still get anxiety. I'm still hypervigilant. I can't help it. And they all try to tell me, what, do you want that to go away? And I said, I don't think that I would want that to go away. And because that's who I am.
Yeah.
I'm on guard. I'm always going to be on guard.
Yeah.
That's just the way it is.
It's interesting you say that about thoughts, because I went through a period for a long time that was really dark, and I think I just felt doom and gloom all the time.
Yeah. Yes, doom and gloom.
Doom and gloom,
That is...
and it was like, and I don't even know what happened. It lasted a long time, and then I think one day, I don't even know what. One day I stepped back and I thought, why do I feel this way? And I realized there was no rational reason to feel that way. I couldn't find anything that would
Right.
indicate that. And then I realized that just because you feel something doesn't mean that feeling is real.
Right.
You know? And then I thought, well, I'm just going to quit listening to that voice. I'm going to be rational about it. And
Right.
but the thing is, I feel like you got to be conscious about it, because feelings just happen all the time. And like you said, if you just let them ride, you start thinking that's real. And it's not.
The feeling of feeling like something bad is going to happen. Rebecca would tell me, because I tell her, I go, something bad's going to happen. Something bad's going to happen. She goes, everything's fine. Everything's good. But I'm like, nope, something bad's going to happen. And so I'd be like walking around talking to myself, like, and waving my Rebecca go, I saw you waving your arms again. Did you get it fixed? And I'm like, I think so. But sometimes it was minute to minute. Like that doom and gloom is like a weight.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually going to start something else, because it still happens. It still comes. And so I'm going to start this different kind of therapy in January to see.
What is that?
It's some kind of
hypnosis?
It's not hypnosis, but it's sort of like hypnosis. Yeah. And so we're gonna try that and see if that works. Because I can't take Lexapro derivatives. So
Yeah.
I'm allergic to that. I do take some medication to help me fall asleep. I still sleep super light. Any kind of little noise, and I'm up. But see, they've all tried to tell me maybe I shouldn't be hypervigilant. You know, some of the...
Yeah.
But I'm like, well, then what? What if something happens? And I'm not ready.
Yeah.
And you know, when the war in Ukraine started, there's a guy in Cody that is married to a Ukrainian woman.
Yeah.
And I was going to fight the Soviet Union forever and ever as a young. I've got the regimental Cold Warrior certificate. And so I'm like, I'm gonna go fight the Russians. I'm gonna go over there. I can do something to help. And this guy was recruiting people to go over there because he had business in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm gonna go fight the Russians. And then Augustus goes, Dad, you can't see. Your fingers don't work worth shit. You can't run. Your back's messed up. Your knees are messed up. Your Achilles. He goes, what do you think you're going to do? And I said, good point. You're right. What am I thinking? And so I got that stupid shit out of my mind.
If you were going to, for people that haven't been to war, and I know it's different for everybody that goes over there, if you would sum that up, what would that be? You know what I mean? Like in a sense, the country, right? You hear about it on a political level or a philosophical level, in a big bureaucratic level. But for when you're in it, when you're in the middle of it, it's totally different. You know what I mean? Like,
so it's a job, and everything is a job, and the job is the mission, and you plan for the mission, and you get ready for the mission, and you go do the mission. So if there's consequences during the mission, like, you know, the IED, like I remember one time we were rolling and an IED went off and one of the SF guys was on a four-wheeler and it was a crappy IED and it just kind of, he said, I'm not riding on a four-wheeler anymore. And we all laughed about it. Okay. Who else wants to ride on a four-wheeler? And somebody else got on it. And he said, I'm not riding on a four-wheeler again. And so you just do the mission. And for, you know, there's a lot of dark humor. And so I remember at the encampment where we had some of the horses outside of Abad up in the mountain, and I can't remember all the names of the camps, but it had been there a while. And I was visiting my soldiers there, and the only way for me to get there was by helicopter.
Right.
And so I'm there for a few weeks, and I met this kid named Toby, and Toby is an E8 with the Civil Affairs Unit there. And Toby's a really nice young kid. He's from Tulsa, Oklahoma. He just had a brand new baby. Toby was killed by an ID about 3 weeks after I left. And so that was a dark moment, but we just move on.
Yeah.
You have to move on.
Well, I guess that's the thing when you're over there. That's what's different from coming back here, right?
Yeah.
In the sense that there's always danger. There's always something you got to keep going. So you can't really deal with it. You just got to push
you just
forward.
come back.
Yeah.
In Iraq when we came back, and I get behind the wheel of my truck, I drive that truck like I'm driving in Iraq,
Right.
zipping through traffic, and every time I saw any kind of object in the road, I'm like,
You don't want to stop there because
no, is that a threat?
Yeah.
Is that a threat?
Yeah.
And still to this day, if I see a trash bag or anything that comes out in the road, is that a threat? Is that a threat? And I look at it that way, and then I move on. But we drove all of us. We drove just, erratic. But when we came back from Afghanistan, since we couldn't drive very fast, I drove slow. And so and totally different. And so I told you about the story about the MIA guy, and they brought him home, from Vietnam. So my real dad had been to Vietnam.
Had been to Vietnam?
He had been in Vietnam.
Yeah.
My uncle Joe was in the Navy, and he wasn't in Vietnam, but I think he was, But my dad was in Air Police, and so he wasn't in actual, day-to-day contact. And they call him Special Forces now in the
right.
Air Force, and so it's very confusing when they say that.
I've never even heard that term.
But it means security forces.
Okay.
They took away the AP and made it the SF.
Okay.
I'm like, they should have kept AP because SF didn't know. But anyway. But when he came back, he went to the University of Arkansas, and he took me to a lot of anti-war demonstrations as a little kid when I came back, because my mom had remarried somebody, and we'd went to Germany with somebody in the military. So I think my mom had something from the uniforms. I'm not sure. But anyway, I'm married a cop the next time.
There you go.
But we went to a demonstration in this mountain home, and it was an arts and crafts deal up in the Ozarks, and there was a guy there that was on a pottery wheel, and he had two stubs, where his arm, and he was blind, and he had scars all over his face, and he was a Vietnam vet, and he had got on a landmine, and he was doing the pottery, and something happened, and he just blew up and picked up and was flinging shit and just running and screaming and I will never, ever forget that. And I remember watching the stuff on Vietnam on TV, and the protest and all that stuff. And that was a big part of my littleness.
Yeah.
And so when I joined the military, when I had First Sergeant Barrera, who'd been to Vietnam and was a professional soldier, and then I had a brigade commander who'd won a Medal of Honor in Vietnam when I was in Germany in the 3rd Infantry Division. And so the reconciliation, so when we came back from Iraq, we flew in and on leave, we flew into Dallas, Fort Worth, and I flew in there 2 different times on leave. There were people streaming down the hall, handing us cartons of cigarettes, welcoming us back,
wow,
and just making us feel, like you're special.
Yeah.
And I can't. And so I always get upset when I think about those kids coming back from Vietnam, and they're old men now and women.
Yep.
And how horrible was that? That wasn't their fault.
Yeah.
But see, that's the political part of it.
Yep.
Yeah. That shouldn't be there.
Circling back around, do your wife and kids think you're angry still? Or just,
my wife,
just surly?
So I thought I could stop my going to therapy.
Yeah.
And I hated the therapy.
Yeah.
But when I got done, I always felt better. But I thought, I'm taking up somebody else's space. And I told my therapist, I said, I don't want to do this anymore because I think somebody else probably needs it more. but I got so anxious when I knew I couldn't do it again. And I was like, no, I won't do it as often, but I still need it. And yes, sometimes I just get mad and I'm mad, and I can deal with it better. But with my kids, I really try not to. Like my son Seamus came home and I got angry about the stupidest thing.
Yeah.
I said, "You're not working. You're not trying." And I just got mad about
Yeah.
it, and I wouldn't quit. And my wife said, "Do you know how stupid that was?" And I thought about it, and I was like, "Oh my God, that was that." And so I really, my boys are grown men. It's their lives, and so if they ask me advice, I'll give it to them. But most of the time, they call their mom.
That's probably how it is most of the time.
But Augustus is an infantryman, and I was an infantryman, so we have that very much in common.
Yeah.
Seamus is in the Air Force, and the Air Force is like a civilian job with a uniform sometimes, and it's so different than the Army. Now, his basic training, though, his first night at basic training, they do the shark attack, and those Air Force guys, they put it on, because Seamus, he called and he said, "Those guys were screaming at me, and I just didn't want to do it." And but he got through it, and I think his basic was probably harder than Augustus's because of COVID.
Oh, yeah.
I remember when we got to basic, the drill sergeants, and the shark attack and all the things they did to us, and then there was a holdover that was getting kicked out, and he was calling us maggots and all this kind of stuff in the barracks at night, and and I don't think they do that anymore. But it was hard. Basic was hard. I remember we were being held over, and some kid that was probably mentally not really fit, he tried to commit suicide, and he tied a cord, a buffer cord, and he threw it over the railing, but the cord was longer, so it didn't do anything except break the buffer, and all it did was get him a trip to probably the psychiatric ward.
Okay. Women in combat. You talked about that girl that was the gunner on the. Talk about her.
My 50 cal gunner was she was short. She was a super soldier. She could do admin stuff.
Where was she from?
She was from Chicago.
What was her name?
Rebecca Delgado.
Did she have a nickname? No.
No, I don't think I called her a nickname.
And she was a
50 gunner, but she was also like she could do the admin stuff. She could do everything.
Yeah.
She's actually a doctor of psychology now, and she works at a VA hospital up in Illinois.
Wow.
And so, but she was a soldier, and she would be up in that turret when the dust is powdery and you can't see anything, and she'd have her stuff wrapped up, and she'd stay up there in the cold and whatever. But the team, the females that we had on the team, my wife was on a team, and that was probably some of the first missions that they would go out on, and when we were in Bosnia.
Wow. Because
we needed them to go into the villages.
Right.
And I wasn't there one day, but Rebecca took the active duty PSYOP commander, the colonel, out on a mission, and two Serbs that I think one of them was our interpreter Serb, and they were like two, and she jumped in between them when they were fighting, and that colonel impressed the hell out of that colonel.
That's good.
But women in combat. So my son is in infantry. There are women that are now rangers. There are women that are in special forces. I think there is a place for them in all places. The military is not the military that I joined. There are female soldiers that are badass that could probably whip other people.
Yeah.
But I don't know if it'll cause problems. The kids grow up in a different mindset today.
Yeah.
So it's not like, everybody's going to be jumping everybody's bones. I'm sure of that. I'm sure it's going to happen. But I don't think if they can do it, why not? I learned myself when I was in infantry, so there's no way women don't belong here.
That was your old self.
That was my old self. But after seeing it up close and hearing some like the MPs that were on convoy duty, that were in the shootouts, they handled themselves sometimes better than the guys that were with them. And so everybody's different. So I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
I go to some meetings with the American Legion and stuff,
Yeah.
and they've changed. So my Vietnam friend,
Leaning a little in
my
that way.
Vietnam friend who flew dust offs in Vietnam,
Yeah.
and Jerry, he kind of holds our church together here. In his 365 days as a dust off pilot, CW2 Jerry Ewan, he flew 1,100 missions.
Wow. Holy
A little
smokes.
over 1,100 missions. He had friends that were nurses that went on, flew on the missions too. Did you know that the VFW and the VA did not recognize women in the military? Even the nurses.
Wow.
Like, if you ever read about Anzio and when they were on the beachhead, those nurses there were in combat.
Wow.
And they didn't let them go to the VA. They don't need to go to the VA. They wouldn't let them in the VFW.
Wow.
They didn't happen until like the 1980s.
Wow.
Can you imagine that?
No.
And they had to fight to do that. And so, and I've read some of the books about it. I'm like, holy smokes. So they did not recognize that until later.
Yeah.
And even when, like, and it's actually a pretty good book, the wall was being put up. So these nurses were trying to put up a memorial for nurses. And the guy that was doing the wall, he's like, no, they wouldn't do it. They had to get it passed from Congress and all this stuff, and they had to pay for it themselves.
Oh, man.
Just like the wall. But I mean, it took a long time. But anyway, Jerry got a commendation from those nurses for his time as a dust-off pilot. But and he got a Purple Heart. He was wounded. He didn't ever have a helicopter shot.
How old is he?
Gosh,
80s?
I think he's 80 something.
Is he pretty sharp?
He's very sharp.
Man, would he talk?
Yeah, he would.
Next time I come up here, we should do that.
I was thinking I should have.
Man, 11. That's unfathomable.
Yeah. And so,
Wow.
seeing what I saw when I was little,
Yeah.
and so like when coming back, through Dallas, I'm gonna tell you another story. So I'd been to Iraq, I'd been to Bosnia. I was at the Pitzer Ranch sale in Nebraska, a horse sale.
Yeah.
And one of the guys that works with the auctioneer that's out in the audience that gets
Yeah.
he's like pointing for the
Yeah.
auctioneer and
Yeah.
stuff. So I'm talking to this guy, and he goes, "Oh, I was a Vietnam vet." And I said, "Oh," I said, "Well," I go, "Thank you." I said, "What did you do?" And I don't remember what he did, but he was a ground pounder. He was a soldier.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And he started talking about being hungry and not getting chow right. And I said, "Well, I know what that's like." I said, we carried our own MREs when we first went to Afghanistan, and we didn't have food and stuff. And he got so mad at me, he started berating me and screaming. He says, "You don't have any idea what I was like or what I did. You can't even be close to that." And I was like, "Whoa!" I said, "I can be hungry." But I was thinking I can be. I mean, I didn't get upset.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was like, but his welcome home was not like my welcome
Yeah,
home.
for sure.
And all those guys that see that as older, can you imagine? I mean, we all say, welcome home now, but they didn't get it then.
No.
And so that's always going to be there. That's always going to be there. And it's like pulling out of Afghanistan. That's always going to be there, that we just dumped it.
Yep.
We just dumped it. In fact, one of all those Marines that were killed in that gate there.
Yeah.
The only Army guy was a PSYOP guy
Oh.
who was a former infantry soldier.
Oh.
And so yeah.
Last thing. How did God play into all this for you? How did going to war change your relationship with God, or did it?
It made my relationship with God much better,
How so?
because it gave me. That's probably why I had that. I wasn't.
That's why you never felt fear.
I don't think that I felt fear, because if I die, I'm going to heaven. That's in my mind, and I'm like, well, it can't be that bad. And so, and I had a job to do, and I had to take care of my soldiers, and there was a time that I was probably pretty agnostic, and I was mad at God, and I got mad.
What was that, in your 20s?
Probably in my 20s, and
How long did that last?
a long time. It probably lasted at least over 12 years. I was a heathen for a while,
Yeah.
and I'm still a sinner. There's
everybody is.
But I feel the reassurance that I don't believe like everybody else believes. I believe that if I do like Jesus or try to do like Jesus, I'm going to be okay. So when I'm out praying, I don't need, I can pray to God and God's going to talk to me. And I pray when I'm on my horse, when I'm riding, if I'm by myself. But when I didn't believe, when I wasn't believing, Randy Bradley was my friend, and I hauled cattle for him.
Yeah.
And his wife worked at the post office where I worked. And I told him, I don't believe, I don't want it, because everybody around me was a believer, going to church, and Tom was not, and Tom was going to fight it.
Yeah.
So Randy would just invite me to like help him do his cattle stuff or haul his cattle. And he'd say, Tom, why don't you read this book? And he gave me this book, and it was about all these non-believers who came back to believing. And there was a story in there.
Did you read it?
Yeah.
Why did you decide to read it?
Huh?
Why did you?
Because I like to read.
Okay.
I
so
read
you didn't care. You're just going to read it.
I'm just going to read it so I could answer their questions.
Yeah.
Because when they asked me questions, I'll say, well, I read it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, but there was a part in there about, and if you think about like the turmoil that we're having during our election and all that.
Yeah.
So think about, Pontius Pilate.
Okay. Yeah.
The governor of that little area, he's been appointed by the Roman. That's his job.
Yeah.
Roman soldiers, and I think he just had a cohort, which is like a company.
Yeah.
I don't think he had a whole bunch because he wasn't the big governor. He
Yeah.
was the little governor. But he got all this turmoil going on. The political ramifications, if he screws it up, he could be jerked back and lose whatever.
Right.
If you are a Roman soldier, you get a pension, you get citizenship. It's a big deal if you make your 20-year commitment and you don't
Was
get
that
killed.
true?
Yes.
Wow.
And they had good medical, they had
my gosh.
they had good
I didn't
discipline.
know that.
The Roman roads got built by the soldiers as they were moving.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so all the Pharisees, they're a political body in this place. When the Romans go in, they try to assimilate. They don't just, they're like, let people do their religions, do their things. And so, but you have this guy named Jesus who said he is the Son of God. And he is out walking around saying, I'm the Son of God. Now, Pontius Pilate's like, whatever, it's not my problem. It's the Pharisees' deal. But the Pharisees don't want to do it because they don't want to be the bad guys or whatever. And so it gets put back on Pilate, and Pilate has to crucify this guy to get these Pharisees to keep everything going good. We can collect our taxes.
Yeah, yeah.
But it is political upheaval, right?
Yeah.
And in this book, it talks about it is going on. What do we do? I'm going to put some guards on this body. And they're still not sure if it was Roman soldiers or Pharisee guards, but either way, these guys ain't going to sleep.
The Roman guys.
Yeah.
Or the Pharisees. Yeah.
I mean, can you imagine? Yes, this guy's supposed to be awake in 3 days. Don't let somebody come steal his body, and we never know.
Yeah.
Right? And so they're professional. It's a professional organization.
Yeah.
They got all this turmoil, but I know as a guy that's been on guard duty,
you have that perspective
that you're
gonna
not
stay
going
awake.
to sleep.
Yeah.
And your buddy is not going to let you go to sleep, and we're standing guard, and we just got to be there for that 24 hours, and then this is going to go away because he's supposed to come out on day 3. It happened. They didn't go to sleep. I mean, whatever, angel came down and rubbed something, but it was a miracle. It's a miracle. And so miracles happen. Miracles that night that I was in that ambush showed me the way. When I was a little kid, I got sucked under some stuff when we were floating on inner tubes, and I lived. And then I saved a kid that was drowning. When I was a young soldier in Germany on Corporal of the Guard, a kid tried to commit suicide on me on hanging himself off the gate. And usually we didn't go check the radios, and the radios were kind of wonky, these old prick 97s, prick 97, I think they were 97, 97s, 98s. But anyway, I rode my bicycle, and I thought he was getting attacked by a wild boar because of all the grunting and stuff that was going on. And so
man.
but I had to lift him up and cut him down from the parachute cord off of the gate, and so so for me, and I thought, okay, God, that's what my purpose is, right? That's I've done it,
Yeah.
or I've done this, or I've done that, and every time that I think that I've fulfilled my purpose, I get pointed in another direction, and so I tell my story, and I still cuss. I say cuss words. I'm a sinner. I try not to bring the Lord's name in vain. And people will go, "You're religious?" I'm like, "I'm not religious. I believe in God." There's a difference. And so I am not the nicest person. I'm not the best person. But God always gives me another purpose. So I got to wait and see what the next purpose is. This may not be it. Saddles and service may not be it. I thought being the first sergeant was it when I saved people. Going, and there's always something else. It's never over. And so I'm just like, all right. And sometimes I am pissed off like a son of a bitch because I'm like, dude, leave me be. But it ain't over because I'm overwhelmed by stuff sometimes. I'm just overwhelmed. And I really have to focus and say, give me that peace, please. And sometimes I think maybe I'm not supposed to have that peace so I can keep driving on in a different direction.
Thanks, dude.
Huh?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
God. What a great conversation, man. That was good. You're a stud, dude. You're a dang stud.